Mama's been hurting, 'cause Daddy's been down. Ain't nobody been working since the mill left town. They got two youngins not 10 years old, with $200 left in his billfold, and a week's worth of groceries is the price of gold when your whole damn country's been bought and sold. Never there's been hard times, it's always made hard folks who could get her to the other side and not let it be all she wrote. I'd love to live to be an old man, but God, you can take me a young one. Just don't let the land I love die so young. Of thee I sing, I've been flying low in my troubled mind. Get to digging me a hole my soul can't climb. So it's the end of the world, but nobody knows, 'cause they all just stare at the trash on their phones in a land that's littered with many men's bones who died fighting for somewhere they could call home. Whenever there's been hard times, it's always made hard folks who could get her to the other side and not let it be all she wrote. I'd love to live to be an old man, but God, you can take me a young one. Just don't let the land I love die so young. Of thee I sing,
flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me, yeah.
What is going on, Hive? Let me just make sure my sound's good. Of course it's not. Of course. Why would it? Oh, wait, there it is. It actually is working. Nice. What is going on, everybody? Happy Monday. Today is June 9th, 2025. And buckle up because this is probably the most excited that I've been for a stream. Not that I don't get excited for all of them, but this one is going to be extra special with our surprise guest. And I was saying, of course not, because I couldn't hear my audio coming through my phone, but it was just because my phone was turned down. As you know, if you tune in regularly, for whatever reason, my audio, I'm cursed that I don't get clear audio right away. So, anyways, I'm trying to get better with it, Donna. And man, I usually will post a TikTok or a short to promote a live whenever there's a guest on. So as you guys know, Monday nights are always Devil's Advocates and I. Most other weeknights are Phoenix Talks. Thursdays are Sammy T Mafia. And then obviously we'll have random guests on. Sunday night on June 22nd will be the first Hive Mind Roundtable. I've had a handful of people email me with some awesome ideas. So if that is something that you're interested in being a part of, it's a free live stream, but it's just going to be a Sunday night roundtable. Like I said, June 22nd, 7 p.m. Central. You do not have to be on camera, but you can email me, birdiebombshell00@gmail.com. And I would probably plan to have anywhere from an hour and 15 minutes to 2 hours of free time, if that's something you'd be willing to commit to. So, yes, Beck, what is up? What is Gucci, my Louis? So we got Chantelli Lace that says, crap, I forgot to email. That's all right. You can do it. You got time still. And we got Festive 1111. Shannon, good evening to you. Sherry, hello. Mercedes, happy Monday to you as well. CJ, how are you doing? Hi, Dina. ATL, what is going on? Salty says, locked up. What's up, Kylan O from Dane County? Nice. Hey, Carrie. Love that, Nicole. Thank you for tuning in. What's going on, Jeremy and Claire? I do my best to try and respond to emails. Obviously, I've had to bring in my wife to help do that. Shout out to Mrs. Birdie. What's up, Kitty? Kaylee from the UK. We got Holly and who else? Leslie and Billy. Happy Monday. How you doing, Janet? Absolutely, Sandra. Thank you for tuning in. Always great to see your name in the chat. Yo, Brandon. Man, this is great. This is absolutely awesome. Last night was crazy. If you stayed, we lost about half of the live when we started talking about that. Understandably so. It would make your skin crawl. Phoenix, what's Gucci, my Louie? And it was wild. Just wait until you see what somebody in the Hive uncovered that was pertinent, whatever that word is, to what we watched last night. It's not graphic. It's nothing. It's just going to make your skin crawl with how eerily creepy and similar it is. But anyways, where is everybody tuning into, or where's everybody tuning in from? That is one of my favorite things to do every time that I sign on. I love seeing how far and wide the Hive reaches. I will give a background kind of preamble to what it is that we watched last night. We got Minnesota, South Florida, West Virginia, Dallas, South Carolina, Massachusetts, South Dakota, Illinois, Mobile, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Jersey Shore, Florida, Texas, Florence, Kentucky, Houston, Texas, another Bama, New York, another Bama, West Virginia, Toronto and Ontario and Maryland and Ohio and Kansas, Vancouver Island, Boston, Nashville, Virginia Beach, another Alabama, Roll Tide. Well, I say War Eagle. Maryland, Bell County, Kentucky, Muskegon, Michigan, Auburn, California. Shout out to my Wisconsin folks. Planet of the Apes. Love it. I love it. Thank you for sending love from Boston. Cheat code. Louisiana, the No Limit Gang's in the house. We got Arizona. We got Scotland, Montana, Franklin. CJ, I'm glad you can we can agree to disagree on that. We got New Orleans and Ohio. So, Natalie, that is a great question. I'm not completely cutting TikTok off. Okay. I feel like when I did a poll, a lot of the hive has made the jump to YouTube. If you've been on the streams on YouTube compared to TikTok, they just run so much smoother. They're visually better. There's less restrictions and it's a much better viewing experience. And for me on this end, this platform is much easier to show and share my screen. So anyways, Chrissy, this is a great segue into the first hive mind. And so if you are just tuning in, I will give a quick recap. We have been finishing every stream with a 10-minute Q&A. Phoenix Talks had a great idea as far as at the end of every stream, we can recap it. We'll do 10 minutes where we'll put questions on screen and we'll answer it. And somehow, like a serial killer in Austin, Texas, came up with 19 bodies that was recently found in the lake. And the police were saying, oh, there's no need to be concerned, which is concerning in itself. And that conversation progressed into Phoenix asking me, you guys may have heard of this creator on TikTok. It's like Thunderkeck is his name. Pretty big creator, over 1.5 million followers on TikTok. And he's just breaking into the WWE. But for a couple years now, he's been buying stuff off of the dark web. Like he's got this robot that has a webcam that follows him around his house that says like Santa Claus. It's very odd. And honestly, he might be cooked at this point because what he got in the mail, he's the dude that got the bloodied boots. It's going pretty viral on TikTok. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but some people say it's real. Some people say it's fake. To me, honestly, I think what we watched last night was real. And I think he's cooked, fully cooked. And he got these bloody boots from the dark web, and it came with a video VHS. He sprayed the boots with luminol, and it lit up like a damn Christmas tree. Then he goes and tries to find a VHS player to play this videotape. And it is so weird. It's so dumb, but it makes it so creepy because somebody took the time to edit an hour and 20-minute video or whatever the length of it was that goes in reverse for like 15, 20 minutes. Then it starts playing forward. It starts showing glimpses of people's legs in boots on the ground saying proof accepted. You must submit proof or you'll become the proof. And then it shows a picture of like where the image isn't clear enough. And to be honest, it was really gross. We literally were like, no weapons formed against us shall prosper. And it was pretty intense. So yeah, add or be added was another one. And man, that was pretty wild. But I see Devil's Advocate is backstage, everybody. So I'm going to bring him up prior to the Hive Mind find so he can chime in on it. And let's get him on up here now. What's going on, man? How are you doing?
Hey, what's going on? How's my sound?
You're loud and clear on my end. Chat, you guys hear him?
Excellent. Good call. I miss how you found that. Like, how did he get the boots on this story? Like, I heard about the boots. I saw a little bit about the boots, but how did he actually find the boots?
I think he was. So I guess the background story of how he actually ordered the boots, from what I feel like I know from just following him, is he does just like random side quests on Tor.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's kind of his thing. I don't know if there was a specific thing that prompted the boots, but I do know like he's gone on these like scavenger hunt type missions where like he's in the McDonald's parking lot connecting to Wi-Fi and it pops up and it says a certain message to him. Like it's really weird, bro. It's so weird. And yeah, I mean, I agree. Phenom, Mimom, I agree. I hope that it's blood off of a pot roast. However, I think he's pretty scared in his videos. And so Devil's Advocate, that's kind of the background of it. But dude, look at this. It kept flashing Keeper of Souls on the screen, showing pictures of boots. I'm just saying, we live in a sick world, okay? And writing a children's book where you're playing chess with shoes, and it says kindergarten through grade 4 is what's recommended. Colin is a much beloved and somewhat magical cobbler whose expertly crafted shoes enhance the lives of all who wear them, even death. While this is not Ingmar Bergham's Grim Reaper, the specter is shrouded in black and arrives to tell the shoemaker that it is his time. The quick-thinking man, noting that his visitor is barefoot, instantly creates a pattern for coffin-shaped sandals to be ready in 1 month. Boots follow, then sportier walking shoes, slippers, fancy court shoes, until finally death allows no more distractions. When he reminds the artist that he has come for his soul, Colin retorts, "And what do you think I've been giving you all these many years? I've given you the soul. I've given you soul after soul." Death laughs, permitting a further extension. Now, if you were to ask me, that is very creepy. And it's, I don't know. It's just weird. I doubt it's related, but it's just like, I will never look at anything called Keeper of the Souls again, because dude, like we saw, like he had to cover up parts of the video where this guy's legs were like trembling with boots on. And like, you could tell like somebody was laying on the ground with the boots that he had.
The part I saw of the video was a bunch of backwards stuff, like the whole, like it was a bunch of video clips running backwards and commercials running backwards and stuff like that. I didn't see, did it go beyond that and get weirder? Because maybe I didn't stay long enough for that. But.
Well, honestly, it was like it had like subliminal messages. I was like, oh shit, yeah. I'm wearing headphones that are noise canceling. The metronomes are getting into my brain. Like I've been watching this too long. It's got flashing images, and now I just got MK Ultra'd pretty much. So, but anyways, man, how are you doing on this Monday night?
I'm good. It's kind of funny because this story, the backwards thing is funny because as an aside, I'm so old. I was a young man in a church when backmasking started to become a major thing, right? And I actually gave a presentation to a church about all the backmasking and music and playing stuff backwards and stuff like that. So when I heard the backwards stuff and that thing, I'm like, I know that's to sound very, very well. So it was kind of funny. You kind of took me back in a weird way to that kind of stuff. And then it was funny. I just recently, as a random thing on TikTok, I'm getting served up these videos from back in that day when some guy was saying that when humans talk, we're actually also talking in reverse and we don't realize it. And if you listen to normal people talk and then reverse it, you'll hear subliminal message in just everyday conversation. Like we're like literally transmitting information backwards and forwards when we're talking to people. I thought that was crazy. He's got a book on it. And I didn't pick up the book, but that's just random thoughts from me when I heard the backwards stuff. But other than that, I'm doing good. Thanks.
Dude, I see my brain. That's why I love having you on. My brain's like, why do you think they call it spelling? Like broadcasting, spelling. You guys want to go down a deep rabbit hole right off the jump. But now I'm starting to think maybe I could record Mrs. Birdie's voice if she's maybe a little bit fired up at me, and I could be like, there's a subliminal message in there somewhere if I reverse it that's actually like, I love you, honey. I'm really not mad. Maybe
maybe you don't want to go there. Don't dive into the wife's psyche. You might not like where that goes. I don't know.
Yeah, right. There might be. I'm scarred for life from the subliminal messages that my wife's language says backwards. Yeah.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for.
And I see Allie is backstage, so we will crank through these hive mind finds. Allie, if you can hear me, we will let you up probably in the next 5-10 minutes tops. Okay. So I can see you. Nobody can see you. I can just see you. All good. Okay. Cool. All right. Now, this one, I'm gonna swallow my pride a little bit because this email that I got about 30 minutes before the show talks about how I've been posting 4chan stuff. Okay. And he was a little rude in it. I'm not gonna lie. A little rude. Might be a little language in here, but his explanation of these 4chan posts is really informative and good to know. So while he was calling me out in a way, I've decided I took the higher road. I'm like, to be honest, I had no idea of anything that you said is like what 4chan language is, right? So he pretty much, I'm going to read this to you and then I'll talk about the post, but this is what he said to me. Oh, can you guys hear me? Devil's advocate, you're on mute.
I said you froze up for me, but you're back. Sorry.
Yeah, my Wi-Fi my air kicked on. Okay. It should be better now. So anyways, it said, I just watched your last 4chan video. Every post you used in that video was literally Fed posting. Didn't you notice the way the Fed spelled titties instead of the wizard titties, which I'm sure now my guest is in the backstage thinking, what the hell kind of stream that I just joined here? They're talking about 4chan titties, but it goes somewhere with it. He said, you are apparently completely ignorant of how 4chan is quote unquote operated. Either that, or you're literally doing it on purpose, which means Fed posting. Had these posts led back to anyone involved in that crime, one, they would have been deleted and the posters would have been ID'd. You don't know 4chan and you're either being duped or you're involved with the dupers. That's my vote. So I'm like, okay, well, that's hilarious. And all of that is designed to muddy the waters. The frat boys were up to their own shit. Were they involved in the murders? Don't be a tard. They were involved in plenty of other shit, but none of them committed any murders. The contractor was sent in for a specific purpose. Some roommates were told to make yourself scarce, but to claim they knew why. Don't be stupid. There is a hot, tangled mess there, but the feds were not going to use some retarded kid to carry this operation out. I mean, I'm just reading this chat just so you know. Those posts you use in the video are freaking hysterical. They were purposefully muddying the waters, and you took the bait. Everything they posted was designed to create confusion, aim people in a completely different direction, a direction that will never pan out because none of those frat boys committed those murders, and neither did Kohlberger. There is plenty the frat boys did, including running drugs, covering up a hazing death, but none of them are, quote unquote, involved to the level of, quote unquote, management and operations. This is the part and why I wanted to share it, but here is the context, okay? After the robot thread Fed poster got all the hot sauce, aka what can they know or figure out from the whiz, they deleted the I'm just helping you effers frame a local thread and then decided how they wanted to frame it and went forward with their, oh, look, the killers are posting on 4chan. Look what they said. The dates Wiz posted are a month before your quote unquote expose posts. So you're literally Fed posting. The question would be, is it on purpose, aka with the feds? Is it to preserve your theory, or are you just gullible? Which I'm going to pause there. I told him, apparently I was wadding into Fed posts knee deep and had no idea, because here is the part where he starts talking about Fed posting. He says, feds literally used 4chan posts and memes to write the manifesto of the Hammerman, aka Paul Pelosi's lover. See the maps, and I'm going to show you guys this. Wiz posted those to show the likely parking place of the contractor as he went into the house via the back way, already scouted out via e-bike. Please note, the feds went house to house in that area, making sure no one saw anything. Oh, sorry. Go and try to find any info out about said car. By the way, chances are pretty good that John Showalter is gay. Also, chances are absolutely none of these kids have any idea who the contractor was. 4chan found 2 active serial killers. One they named the messy knife killer, and the other they named the numbers killer. During the Fed poster robo threads, they did this by tracking missing women and or found dead women in the radius that Wiz outlined in that picture over there. Far as I know, the Wiz went dark after the I'm helping you frame a local post and has never come back to post, at least not any remote viewing post, whatever. There was a Fed trying to impersonate him a few times. And his whole thing is that titties versus titties, and he goes, Fed's fucked up. Okay, I wanted to read that whole thing because it's obviously a lot to unpack, but it's something that I think we should remember when looking at the 4chan and Reddit stuff. Is there is a certain like 4chan language, if you would agree with that, devil's advocates. There's a certain tone that people talk. They call it like shit posting or whatever. It's much more vibrant in language and tone. But I think he makes a good point where he can pick up on it. He's a 4chan user. He knows how normal 4chan people post. And, you know, apparently a lot of these posts have been called out as being feds. So anyways, interesting long email, might be onto something, but he did include this map that he says the FBI scouted as far as, or what does it say on the bottom here? It says the feds were going door to door over the weekend, asking residents within a certain radius of the murders if they could inspect vehicles and tires. Tells me they suspect involvement of a vehicle in some capacity. He says T. guy whose friends got a visit by the FBI. And it is interesting. It does all go up this back way here that they went and they talked to people. He's mapped it out. It has really nothing the way that the launcher would have gone. So I will pause there. Devil's advocate, anything?
Oh, I'm digesting. How do I? Yeah, I'm digesting. I don't know how to. So I worked in the intelligence community, and so I want to add a thing that won't violate any whatever things that I took. But the point being is that you can be assured the feds scrape Reddit and scrape 4chan, and they run it through AI tools. They use that as a massive repository to find out what people are doing and how they're talking and watching people, kind of thing. You can just basically assure that that's happening, kind of thing. Now, whether or not the feds are crafting some kind of counterintelligence and putting messages out on the board themselves, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, kind of thing. But I always have a skepticism when people start doing the whole, this is the word that a Fed would use, and therefore now you know it's a Fed, and therefore now, and then they go down this long rabbit hole, and it's like, it could have just been somebody used, like, you know.
Yeah, they could have spelled titties wrong, right? And now
Right,
you're a
exactly.
Fed.
And now you're a Fed, which I, you know, like I said, everything I take with a grain of salt. But I mean, I do know that these websites provide a massive amount of material. A 4chan and any Reddit board like Reddit, probably Reddit's the biggest one ever, you know, is a great place for intelligence gathering, and so they're going to be involved in these kind of sites. And again, in the Koberger case, to go back for that for a moment, we know that the feds were looking into some of those Papa Rogers and different people that were posting and 4chan and in Facebook, and they were watching those things and keeping track and following up leads. That's some of their tips come from people trying to leak information anonymously on anonymous boards like this. But
yeah. So, I mean, I totally, don't get me wrong. Let's all wrap our heads around. The feds are for sure posting on these anonymous sites.
Yeah.
Okay. So, chat, I have a couple more Hive Mind finds, but out of respect for the time of our surprise guest, I hope you guys are as excited as I am to talk with them. I am going to give a brief introduction and then let Allie up. We are fortunate enough to have a trial attorney with over 15 years in experience that specializes in criminal defense and civil rights. She's a true vet in federal and state criminal defense, an expert litigator for high-profile cases like murder, robbery, and white-collar crimes. Please welcome to the Hive, Allie.
Yay!
Hey guys.
How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Hope you are.
Yeah, we're doing good. We're doing good. And I really appreciate you making some time to hop on the stream. And Devil's Advocates, thank you for the connection here.
Yeah.
So, Allie, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how it is that you got into being an attorney? And
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in New York, and I went to law school actually in South Carolina. I've practiced in South Carolina for the entirety of my career. And like you said in your introduction, I have focused my practice primarily on criminal defense, everything from, smaller crimes all the way up to complex federal RICO litigation and violent crimes such as murders and sexual assaults. I also do a good bit of 1983 litigation, civil rights involving police brutality, prison conditions. And I'm just, I'm a Luigi Mangione trial fanatic, I guess, is the way to put it. And I'm relatively new to TikTok. That's how Lee and I got linked up. And I'm just excited to talk about the law. I love the law. And I happen to be really enamored with Luigi's case.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can I have a couple of questions to lead into whatever it is that we end up diving into. We kind of go no script here, as I was telling you in the emails. So if there's a direction that you want to take, something that myself or Devil's Advocate says, feel free to. But one of my questions is I always like to learn a little bit more about some of the guests that we have on. Have you, when you said you love law, did you know as a little girl that you wanted to be a lawyer, or when did you decide?
Yeah, so I always make this joke. If you are the child of immigrants, which I am, my mom's a Cuban refugee, my dad is Italian, you get told as a kid, you have two choices. You can be a doctor or a lawyer. And so I actually spent the first 2 years of my undergrad career at pre-med and discovered really quickly that I was real shitty at organic chemistry. And so that wasn't going to shake out for me. And so the running joke is that law school was the fallback. But in reality, I was always kind of enamored with the law. I really enjoyed it. And so it just seemed like a good career path, and it's worked out. And, what do they say? If you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life. I love what I do. So it's great.
That's awesome. And Devil's Advocates, you can add into anything if you want to maybe talk about how you and Allie met. And
it's kind of hilarious that she said that, because when I went to college, went to the university, I was going to go into psychology and I was going to become a psychiatrist. And I ended up getting too many C's because of damn biology and chemistry, which I couldn't stand. I just absolutely had no mind for the sciences. And so I got sat down by a counselor when I was working on my bachelor's degree and said, look, dude, you'll never go to grad school. You've got C averages and you need to have up there in the B plus average, kind of to even have a chance. So you're going to be a social worker and you're going to hate your life for the rest of your life. You really need to change your career. I dropped out of school. I never finished my bachelor's. Now I'm thinking maybe I should have gone into law because I was sucked at I sucked at the sciences too. But I thought that went hand in hand. So
that's hilarious, dude. I always like to ask, what did you want to do as a kid? In elementary school, when they career day, they have you write down each grade as you go through, what do you want to be when you're older? I wrote, for some reason, kindergarten through third grade, that I wanted to be an elevator cop. I don't even know what that is. Just somebody that sits in a chair and rides the elevator up and down all day and provides security. So
I'll share two quick things because I don't want to waste Allie's time. I'll share two quick things. I wanted to be one of two things when I was younger. I wanted to be a writer, which I still want to be that. And the other big dream I had is I wanted to be a rock star. I had my 15 minutes of fame when in high school. There was a band that was very popular. They lost their lead singer. I tried out for the band. The guitar player was in the other room while I was trying out with the rest of the band. I did so well on the singing, he comes running out of the thing. I had instant groupies the next day. I had girls following me around high school. And then I was too chicken shit to get on stage. I was terrified. I had massive stage fright, and I couldn't even get to band practice after that because I was just terrified. But I had groupies for a day, so I was super excited.
That counts. That counts.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah,
sweet.
And I don't know if I froze a little bit there, but anyways, can you guys unclear again?
Mm-hmm.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We can hear
All
you.
right. So let's get into this a little bit. Okay, let's get into this a little bit. Allie, so when you decide to take on a client, let's use a high profile type situation here, whether it be a Brian Koberger or Luigi.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some sort of like interview process that you do in those type of cases, given that it's more high profile, that makes you look at it maybe a little bit differently than just a normal defense case?
So not really. I treat every case as though it's going to be a trial. I don't think all lawyers necessarily do that out the gate. I do, because even if a case ends up pleading or being negotiated outside of court, I want my client to know that I am prepared from day one, and I'm thinking about things in terms of the long game, meaning I'm thinking about how will this play in front of a jury eventually, even if we never get there. And so cases that have received a lot of media attention on the front end, I have had several of those. They, of course, have to be treated more sensitively, and it involves a lot more talking with the family about the way the case will be handled, as well as talking to the client about how many eyes are on the case and how they have to be so careful, especially if they're out on bond. Like Luigi's detained. Is Brian Koberger, is he detained or is he out on?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, when you're in jail, you can't really get into that much trouble other than talking on the phones too much. And so if somebody's out on bond, I give them the talk about how things are being watched and how potential jurors will see the case and media attention and things like that. But in terms of preparing the case, every case for me, from the minute they walk in the door, I pretty much start writing my closing argument in my head.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Allie, what percentage of your clients actually go to trial, and what percentage plead out before you ever get to trial?
That's so tricky. I would say that I feel like I love being in trial, but statistically fewer and fewer cases every year, especially in state court, are going to trial versus 10, 20, 30 years ago. I would say for me, in a good year, I have 5 to 6 trials. So maybe one every other month. Some years I only get 2. Some years I have 8. Some I have more than that. And some of those trials are much more serious and some are a little less serious. And so you can handle more of them. So I would say fewer than half of my cases will end up going to trial, typically, on average.
Okay, that's interesting. That's good to know. I was asking about the high profile type stuff because does that also change when you're asking the person you're about to be defending questions? Does that change in your mind the legal defense strategy you might go with based on trial by media or any kind of eyes on it, as you said, with more eyes on it?
I think so. I think it requires that both the lawyer and the client be more deliberate about every single small step than we otherwise would be in a case where we did not have eyes on it until it comes time for trial. Most cases never see the light of a television camera or a newspaper reporter unless there's something of particular interest. And even then, you really don't see reporters or media following a case from the beginning to the end. It'll get a little bit of coverage at the beginning, maybe a little bit of coverage if something earth-shattering happens, and then maybe they'll show up at the trial if people haven't forgotten about it and don't care anymore. But for somebody like Brian Koberger, of course, I feel like the whole country has been obsessed from the beginning, probably because of the nature and the circumstances of that crime. Luigi, I think my theory is a little bit different. I think it's because he's cute. Everybody likes him. And also there's the healthcare, capitalism, ideological component to it as well. And so it does change the way that I approach something, because I'm going to be much more deliberate about every single decision I make, even the small things. So
when you chose to become a defense attorney, and you obviously only answer stuff that you feel comfortable answering.
Yeah.
But in your head, did you create some sort of moral compass or moral checkboxes as far as, okay, this person, whether you ask them if they're guilty or not, which, by the way, do lawyers do that?
Yeah, we
Okay.
do. Sometimes I don't want to know.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. So that's where that moral compass kind of comes in. I'm like, depending on what the crime is, do you have a self-talk process of, can I defend this person? Not just based on I could win the case or maybe I don't.
So I don't, because I don't think I need it. And I'll tell you why. I think I used this phrase with Lee a couple times. I don't defend a person's behavior. I defend that person's constitutional rights. I defend that person against the potential of government overreach and prosecutorial misconduct. I hold the state or the federal government to its burden to prove a person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. They must do that in accordance with the law. They must follow the rules of court. And if they don't, then the ball is always in the favor of the defendant, or it should be in the criminal process. This presumption of innocence, everybody says it, we say it, but we don't mean it or we don't know what we mean when we say it. It literally means that the state or the federal government are wrong about the defendant from the beginning. That's the starting point. And you can't move from that point until and unless the evidence put forth by whoever's prosecuting the case has changed the minds of the juror such that they are firmly convinced beyond a reasonable doubt of that person's guilt. And so, whether somebody has done it or not done it, my job is to ensure that the state does its job or the feds do their job. And however that works out, it works out. But my job is to defend their rights and to make sure that the process is constitutional, ethical, and proper. Does that make sense?
That's an amazing answer. And I think that Hive, which is what I call the chat, Allie, we're the hive mind here. And I
want to ask a follow-on question to it. I want to ask a follow-on, which is, you mentioned, and I think there was another person who may be a lawyer that answered similarly, that they feel the same way about the whole, sometimes I don't want to know. But if I were a lawyer, I want to know everything, right? Because I don't want to get any surprises. Now, granted, I wouldn't expect my client to tell me the truth, but in a perfect world, I would be like, I want to know everything that can possibly come up and surprise me in the trial, so I can make sure we don't go down a path that's going to get us in trouble. So, I mean, how do you negotiate the whole I don't want to know, but then you might get surprised by something that you might have known the answer to if you had known?
Yeah. Okay. So let me be clear. I was being slightly facetious there. I want my client to tell me everything, but you just hit on something. Clients, it is human nature in a lot of ways it's self-preservation, right? Or to minimize your role in something. So oftentimes, and I don't want to say like clients lie, they do, but that's human nature. We all do it. And none of us know what we would do if we found ourselves accused of a crime, whether we did it or didn't do it. Our nature is to preserve and to protect ourselves. And so I think a lot of times when clients aren't honest with their attorneys or can't be honest with their attorneys, it's out of a place of self-preservation and maybe not necessarily realizing how much damage can be done further on down the road. But yes, I want to know everything. Controversial tactic, but I polygraph my clients. I do it under the attorney-client privilege. I have my polygraph examiner come in. Those results are not admissible in court, but I use them as an investigative tool. I use them as a come to Jesus moment with my clients sometimes if there's something I need them to fess up about. And I also use them to negotiate cases. And so really, Lee, to your question, what I cannot do as a lawyer, as an officer of the court, is place somebody on a witness stand knowing that he will lie. And so if I have not had the conversation with the client about whether they did it, that means I haven't properly prepared him for cross-examination. And I would always want the answer to that question in that scenario. But oftentimes, for various reasons, we may not want to put the client on the stand. Sometimes that's a game time decision, and sometimes that's something we know from the beginning. If I've got a client that comes in and his record is longer than my left arm, he ain't getting on that witness stand. I don't care what anybody says. Okay. So I don't necessarily care whether he did it or didn't do it, because I know he is not getting up there.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that you've said about the following the legal procedure the right way. Mm-hmm. And then with what Devil's Advocates just asked, as far as clients being afraid to implicate themselves to their own defense attorney, mm-hmm. What would you say is the best thing that you can do? I've played the Shut the Fuck Up Fridays by those two pot lawyers quite a time. Is that, would you say that's the best advice?
Yes, always. Shut the fuck up is always
Yeah.
in so many contexts. Yeah.
Best legal advice ever.
Yes, best legal advice ever.
Yeah. And so, okay. One of the things, so obviously, devil's advocates, you know more about the Luigi case. Please, obviously, feel free to ask questions on that. I do want to quick touch on the Brian Koberger aspect. It's not that you need to be uber familiar with the case. I know you're obviously a very busy woman, and you said that you have been more so focusing on the Luigi case. But with Brian Koberger,
slowly getting me obsessed with Brian Koberger. So
yes,
I'm giving her a crash course.
I love it. I love it. So I will try to explain a little bit of the background. Are you really familiar with how they got Brian Koberger's DNA in this case?
We actually talked about that a little bit today. So I know.
Okay. So the way that somebody who's obviously never gone to law school, but am passionate about not using an emotional tragedy that people could maybe palate American rights overreach in a court system while their emotions are heightened.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's always bothered me, where the media and the narrative that gets everybody scared or freaked out. And then they're like, well, we could catch him if we used this tactic. And then everyone's like, fine, as long as you only do it with that monster. But They always end up codifying it and making it law after the fact. So the way that I view it is, they didn't have probable cause for Brian Koberger, so that they couldn't go get a warrant for the DNA. Therefore, the feds ended up breaking their own guidelines and using a legal loophole to obtain his DNA from his parents' trash, allegedly, but connect it to a third-party database. And what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's horseshit.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
In a nutshell, that's my analysis. I think it's horseshit. And also, first of all, just like going back to, you made a really good point. Okay. Due process is not selective based on who we think deserves it, based on quality X, Y, or Z. They're not likable. They did this, they committed this heinous crime, and therefore we feel comfortable cutting a corner because we just have to get that guy. Like, the ends justify the means. The ends never justify the means when it comes to skirting due process or eroding people's rights, because it is such, I hate to use the cliche legal term, slippery slope, but once you do it, you never stop. And once you allow a prosecutor, and their feet are not held to the fire, once they are allowed to do that, and once judges continue to allow them to do shady shit like that, it never stops. And the next person is not going to get the benefit of full due process. So I think that's dangerous. So I couldn't let that go, because you made such a good point there. But in terms of how DNA is collected, Lee and I were talking about this earlier. And I understand the judge has made a ruling, and I hope that that's been properly preserved for appeal. But they cannot go around probable cause and then not disclose how they got the sample to match, to do the comparison, to the defense. Because my understanding is they have not disclosed that information to the defense. In fact, they don't want to, and they've refused to. And I would love to get my hands on a transcript if I can. I don't know how the judge allowed that to stand, because you cannot go around the normal method for obtaining a search warrant, to do investigation, to get to DNA by circumventing the normal processes. And that's what it sounds like. And again, without knowing a whole lot about what happened, it sounds like that's what they did. So I'm very curious to see how that issue would come up on appeal.
Let me clarify that a little bit. I did actually send, I don't know if we want to pull it up or not, but I did actually send Bertie a couple of screenshots from Howard Bloom's book, When the Night Comes Falling. And he has a paragraph or two about what they did. And let me summarize it again. If you want to put it up, Bertie, great. If you don't, I'll just speak to it. But what the tricky part they did is, Moscow PD couldn't come up with a lead in the case for almost a month, and the feds were involved from day one. And the feds started looking into Brian Koberger, and they weren't telling the Moscow PD that they knew about Brian Koberger, or they suspected Brian Koberger. Go back to the page before that, the one that's all blue mostly. There you go. So this right here in this paragraph where it says why, one theory had it that the Bureau was simply being cautious. IgG determination was not a sort of evidence. Let me just summarize this first. If you want to read along, you can. But the basic idea is that the feds basically said Othram Labs put something into CODIS, couldn't find a hit because, well, Brian Koberger doesn't have any criminal background, so he's not in CODIS, right? So FBI asked us to take over Othram Labs sample, and they doubled the size. They did some kind of manipulation where they basically take the sample and they keep replicating it until they get a big enough sample size. They eventually used that to get to 4 family members whose all last names didn't match Koberger. And somehow through genetic trees, they ended up getting to, maybe it's the family in Pennsylvania somewhere that might be related. And then they went for a trash pull on the family and got his dad's DNA from the trash and said, well, the biological material of his dad is, 99 point some ridiculous ass number likely to be the father of the suspect in the Idaho 4 murders. And so therefore that puts Brian Koberger at the scene. That's kind of how they went there. But as far as the probable cause affidavit, here's where it gets tricky. So the feds gave the name Brian Koberger to Moscow PD, knowing that and this is my analysis, knowing that they couldn't use the IgG information. It was sketchy in the first place. And basically said, now that you know the name, start digging into this guy. And then Moscow PD said, oh, you know what? There's a guy in Pullman who drives a white Elantra, and he happened to be out driving that night. So we're looking into this guy. And they kind of made it that way. And so then they used all that data, his driving records, his cell phone pings, and basically ignored the IgG information in the probable cause affidavit. So it technically didn't really end up, I don't think, in strong language in the IgG. But the tricky part is, I'll get off the mic so you can comment on all this, is that the prosecution wants to use the DNA evidence in trial to say, we've got Brian Koberger at the scene because of, and it's a nanogram sized piece. It's an invisible sized piece of DNA on the button snap of the knife. But anyways, they want to use it in trial to say they got there, and they have not disclosed in discovery to the defense how they developed that sample. And so this is a big issue. And the judge had said he's supporting that the prosecution doesn't have to tell the defense how they got that sample. And yet they want to present it to the jury. And I think that's the problem.
Yeah, that's wild. And this is trace DNA, right? This is even like real DNA. Sorry,
right.
I freaking hate trace DNA. It's such nonsense.
Yeah. And
well,
it was
again,
found. Go ahead, Devils.
Sorry. Well, again, this is the argument, right? So they called it touch DNA, and I think you and I talked about this. That in the industry, they call touch and trace DNA kind of synonymously. They use the term touch, which implies to any juror that you literally touched it, when it could have been a piece of skin cell floated through the air and landed on it, right?
That's why they call it that. It is inherently prejudicial because they know that a jury is going to hear the phrase touch DNA and not unreasonably assume that means that somebody touched something. Lee, did you share the example that I gave with Birdie?
No, I would love for you to share that.
Do you have time
Yes.
for me to give the example? Okay, yeah. Birdie, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this case. So there was a case, I don't even freaking know, maybe the mid 2000s or maybe early 2010s. There was a guy, there was an unhoused gentleman that lived in California. I got you. There was an unhoused gentleman that lived in California. My understanding is he had a pretty significant alcohol problem. He was outside of a liquor store, and I think he was so drunk that he passed out. Somebody called an ambulance. EMS comes out, they treat him, and they end up taking him to the hospital, and they keep him like a day or 2 days. That same night that EMS came to get the drunk unhoused man to treat him, there was a rich IT executive that lived 50 miles away, somewhere else in California, that was murdered in his home during a home invasion. And EMS responded to that scene and pronounced him dead. And lo and behold, make a long story short, the unhoused gentleman ends up getting charged with the murder of the wealthy businessman. He gets charged with the murder of the wealthy businessman because they decide that the wealthy businessman's DNA is under his fingernail on one of his on the businessman's finger on one of his fingers, that the unhoused guy's DNA is there. How did that happen? I'm going to fast forward. He didn't do it, but the same EMS worker that treated the drunk guy outside of the liquor store used a pulse oximeter. Okay. You know, when they put the little thing on your finger, use the pulse ox. 2 hours later, responded to the scene of the businessman's murder, put a pulse ox on his finger, and ding, 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 guess what? Transferred trace DNA, not freaking touch DNA, transferred it from the drunk guy to the dead businessman. And
convicted him.
Murder.
Yeah.
Because his DNA was found there. So that is how easily trace DNA can be moved and manipulated and float through the air and get transferred on somebody else's body, on an object, to another person. And it's scary.
And this is what bothers me the most, Allie, is people are so, vehement with me that devil's advocates, you're an idiot. His DNA is literally at the scene. You can't get over that. Even Judge Hitler had a famous statement, DNA is DNA every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So they have this idea that if the DNA is on the knife sheath, he was there in the house. And that's not true necessarily. I mean, it could be true, but it doesn't prove that.
It's the case. I think the gentleman's name is Lucas with a weird, funky spelling. I don't know. It's Lucas Anderson's out of California, I would say mid 2000s. It's an old-ish case now, but not really. But it's fascinating.
And I think it was overturned. I think his case was overturned.
Yes. He was exonerated, but holy crap.
Yeah. Is this it, Allie? Is his name Lucas Anderson?
Yeah, right there.
Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
Lukis. Dang, you're quick. Yes, that's it.
So, okay, let me ask you this now, Allie, because where my non-defense attorney credentials, but my fake defense attorney brain goes is, could I tell the jury that story or reference that case to a judge, and does it have any credibility?
Oh, you could 100%. So at a motion to exclude the evidence or a motion in limine, you could absolutely use that as an example. I would every single day. I'd be like, Judge, here's a perfect example of how and why trace DNA. And if that's all you have, meaning if they didn't find saliva or semen or blood or fingerprints or any other form of identifying DNA evidence at the scene, and they're relying solely on this one speck of trace DNA, 100% I'm arguing that case to the judge. But once the judge makes a ruling and allows that in, you would introduce testimony about the unreliability of it through your own expert witness, which that's why, it's not over for Brian Kohberger and, with the judge making this ruling that this is allowed. The defense just has to, and they added somebody to their defense team, I think, that is pretty well versed in DNA, or at least I think I read that somewhere.
Yes.
And they may also hire an expert, and they can try to, without putting the jury to sleep, because God, nothing puts a jury to sleep like DNA. But they can try to explain that in a way where they would appreciate and understand.
And it's complicated because I've watched a lot of cases, and if I've ever seen a judge that seems to be biased, it's Judge Hitler. And he doesn't want their expert to testify. He's come up with all kinds of reasons why it's irrelevant for their, for the defense's lawyer to, again, his mentality is DNA is DNA. There's no reason for us to have another expert come on and talk just about DNA. It's DNA. And to be fair, and I don't know if it's because they just had to at some point, the defense is kind of acquiesced to okay, Kohberger's DNA is at the scene, but it doesn't explain how it's there. And by the way, we think it was planted. Now that's a big one, because if you're gonna just logically, I have to play devil's advocates. That's my name of my channel, right? If you're gonna plant DNA, shouldn't you plant DNA bigger than a piece of a grain of sand that you can't even see? I mean, plant a good fingerprint, for Pete's sake. So I have a hard time a little bit with
Mark Furman did it.
Oh my God. You gotta put the glove.
Sorry, the younger crowd is not going to get that reference.
It's amazing.
Hey, I'm just going to be honest. I think it was his son, by the way, who did it.
OJ's son. Yeah.
Anyways, that's so interesting. So I guess when you were explaining that, Allie, where my head went to was, wow, here I am going through, somebody must have planted that. But in the unhomed person, as you said, and the EMT with the pulse the pulse oximeter, that is such a simple thing. Somebody in the hive said, what if one of the cops that pulled him over for a traffic stop touched his license? And then, again, who knows how long before that and how long it could last. I know it depends on the surface. A lot of people say that brass touch DNA doesn't live for very long, or leather, or whatever it might be. But that is an interesting story about that out in California. Did that guy get out of jail? Was he exonerated, or?
Yes.
He was. Okay.
Yeah.
See, and there's another thing. I mean, this is not a super popular thing. But I've always said from the very beginning of on TikTok, at least, what if Koberger didn't go into the house and he was the getaway driver? What if he dropped somebody off at the house and they committed the murder? That would also explain how trace DNA could get on the knife sheath and it wasn't his. He may have never touched it, but if he was even in proximity at any time of that knife, that's one way it could have got onto the knife, kind of thing. Now, granted, if he was taking somebody to a murder scene and he knew it was murder, he's an accomplice to murder, and so there's that. But again, what if he was taking somebody to a drug buy and it went south and he just took off and left the scene and he's kept his mouth shut until now because now all of a sudden they want to put him to death, and he's like, wait a minute. And maybe that's where the alternate suspect came out, is like, yeah, I wasn't me, I was somebody else. But anyways, there's a lot of theories that could explain how the DNA got on it. All of them seem hard to understand, of course, unless he'd been in the house before, and he claims he's never been to the house before. If he'd been there before, it'd be a moot point because his DNA would be all over the place in the air, possibly, and whatever. But supposedly he's never been in the house. And the other part, Allie, that's really interesting, by the way, from a DNA thing, because that's kind of what I wanted to focus on when I have you on, is talking about your thoughts about DNA, is there was other individuals at the scene. There was a blood spot on a banister on the lower thing that they were just identified as unknown male, B, and there was blood inside of a glove outside the house that they picked up that was unknown male D, and they basically had said there was no need to go very far in testing it because we already know who did it. We've got Brian Koberger's. Like, are you kidding me? Like, how do you just say, oh, we already know who it is, so we don't need to look at other blood at the scene?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I mean, law enforcement does that all the time. It's that tunnel vision mentality. Once they hone in on somebody who works and they can stop working the case, because let's be honest, they don't want to keep working very hard to look to find the truth. If there's an easy, and I hate to say it that way, but so often it's true. They've got an easy solution, an easy person who fits. They will then, instead of doing it in the reverse, they will make the evidence fit their suspect instead of continuing to ask questions and allowing the evidence to dictate where their investigation goes. Instead, they just keep shoving square pegs in round holes because they need for that prosecution to stand. They need for that investigation to have integrity, even though it has anything but.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like we are with the Koberger situation. At some point, they made the determination that Koberger was going to be their guy, and now they're just hammering every square peg into that round hole because they have to, because they've identified who the guy is, and they're just going all in on it.
And now they stand to be embarrassed if anything comes out that they've actually royally effed up and he's not the person, or they've done a bad job. The whole country's watching this case.
Right. That would be the biggest defamation lawsuit I think we will see in decades, because I've always said too that the narrative feels too clean, like just from like a human instinct, like kind of contrarian thinker brain standpoint. It's been too clean. It's felt like it was built around him, kind of what you just referenced, where they have some evidence, they're going to find somebody to make it fit towards. And I am also just so curious, like, if Brian Koberger really is this loner incel that moved across the country and then committed a quadruple homicide with a K-bar knife and somehow didn't have any points of entrance, exit, blood everywhere, no blood on him, nothing like that, you would think, though, the way the news has said it and the way that the state is saying it, it'd be the most open and shut quadruple homicide ever, not the most redacted case, which I know we did want to talk about DNA, but while we got you here, what are your thoughts whenever you see a case at this level go like extremely redacted from the public? Does that typically mean a confidential informant? Does that mean WITSEC? Does that mean?
No, it's really judge dependent. So there's a gag order in the case.
Oh yeah.
And they reference national security as well.
That's interesting. But it's judge dependent. Some judges just don't want to deal with the backlash that comes from having to manage the media circus that will go along with a case of that high profile, or they want to try to contain the information. And some of that has a legitimate purpose, right? Like when you are looking forward and saying, I'm going to have to choose a fair and unbiased jury in this case 2 or 3 years down the road, and you have circumstances that make it such that everybody's heard of the case, everybody's got an opinion about the case, everybody's been reading things and listening to things, it makes it harder. The judge will still ask those potential jurors, can you still be fair and impartial? People lie. And so a lot of times the judges just want to kind of contain that to try to preserve the defendant's right to a fair trial. But the other side of that is that the public has a right to know, right? We're supposed to have open courtrooms and transparency so that we can know what's happening behind those closed doors, so we can know what the state is or isn't doing, what they've turned over versus what they haven't, so that we can examine things and look at them. So to answer your question, I think it's judge dependent, but also, I am sympathetic towards the judge having to balance the interests of those two things.
I've got a question for you. I want to get your opinion on, Allie, and that is from a jury's perspective. If we get into the DNA discussion in trial, which I'm certain we're going to, that could be, I'm guessing, days of the prosecution trying to educate the jury on how DNA works and how the sample was built and blah, 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 so they could reassure the jury that that's a good sample. Yeah. And then you're going to have days of the defense countering everything you just heard. How much does the jury just check out at some point because they just can't follow the science? Or how much do they just go, well, the prosecution says it's good, so it's got to be good because they told me so. I really don't understand it. It's above my head, but they're saying it's rock solid and it's 99.99999% ridiculous number, so it must be true. Like, how does that affect the jury when they have to listen to huge amounts of scientific data?
If there are witnesses on the stand testifying about DNA science for longer than one day, here's what you saw it here first, okay? Actual footage of all 12 jurors. Right? That's what they all gonna look like, okay? You can't. So if they don't want to lose the jury, they will try to find somebody who does not come across like a robot, who can have a real conversation with people and who can make the complicated simple. And then the defense would do well to do the same, because who
does that benefit more? Who does that benefit more, Allie? Does it, if the jury starts checking out and falling asleep in their chair, does it benefit the prosecution more or the defense?
I think it benefits neither, but the problem is I feel like that the public, ever since, we call it the CSI effect, ever since people started becoming obsessed with true crime, listening to podcasts, watching TV, thinking that they know about forensic evidence, we have people that have preconceived notions or ideas about things. And I talk to very educated people, even in the legal field, who say something like, what'd you say? The DNA is DNA. Well, no, it's not. Blood is different than fingerprints, is different from touch. And let me tell you why. And I give people that example. And so you think about how jurors who don't work and live in this space, who don't hear this, on a regular basis, they hear his DNA was at the scene. And then to them, they're like, that's all I need to know. They found his DNA at the scene. That must mean he was there. And so I think in that particular example, the advantage would go to the prosecution, just because I suspect that the general public would hear that and make an assumption and then kind of check out and not listen if the explanation was really boring. And then if the explanation only comes from the defense, they're going to think, well, they're saying that because they're trying to get their client off versus that they're trying to clarify the science.
I'm curious how many homicide cases that you've been involved in which DNA wasn't an issue, or is it always an issue? And how many times, like in this scene, quadruple homicide, and the DNA evidence for Kohberger is one speck of a nanogram sized DNA. How likely is that to happen in a crime scene?
That is, for as messy as it sounds like that crime scene was, from the little bit that I've read about it, from talking to you, it would be really interesting to hear how someone could get out of that house leaving the equivalent of a speck of dust of touch DNA, if he was even in the house. Okay,
on the most convenient piece of evidence too,
And of course, the argument is he is a PhD criminology student, so he knows how to commit the perfect murder. And to counter that right back, because I have to. So that's the argument. He's a PhD candidate student, so he knows how to do it. Yet he's too dumb to not take his cell phone to the crime scene or drive his own car to the crime scene. That's the part that I just can't handle. It's like, okay, so he's so brilliant, he can leave only a speck of DNA and track none of the victim's DNA out to his car, anywhere where they can find. But he's not smart enough to leave his cell phone behind to commit a quadruple murder. I don't get that.
Yeah, no, it would be highly unlikely. But I mean, that being said, there are cases that are purely circumstantial that have no, direct evidence at all. And so that, doesn't foreclose the possibility of a prosecution, of course. But, I think if I'm the defense lawyer in that case, I am making so much noise about that. I am explaining it. I am describing the scene in great detail. I'm letting the jury see those pictures. Probably, I'd probably have to think about that, whether I'd fight that or not, to kind of just give the example of how absurd it is that something like this could have happened. He had nothing on him and he left nothing behind. What are the odds of that happening? Does that sound reasonable to you? Does that sound logical? Does that sound likely? And if not, does that little thing in your mind that's questioning, you know what that is? We call that reasonable doubt.
Oh, I feel like you may have used that line in the past in a closing argument.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that a lot of people want Brian Koberger to be guilty, just like I think a lot of people want Karen Reed to be innocent. And that's just more of like the general consensus. And I bring those points up for the want because that's how effective a narrative created by media can be in influencing jurors. There's been rumors that YouTube algorithms have been putting, pro conviction type videos in people that into the people's feeds that live in that area. Obviously, there was the drama around the Dateline NBC episode and the leaks. I feel like if you have a jury that, all right, I'm going to ask it actually. How often do you go into a trial feeling like the trial's over because of the jury picks prior to anything happening? All the time. That's what a lot of people say. Like,
yeah, sometimes you take one look at the jury and you're like,
yeah, yeah,
damn,
yeah.
why did these people show up for jury duty today?
Yeah. I mean,
and that's horrible because we really are. I mean, jury qualification in voir dire is like the biggest exercise in judging books by cover and profiling that like the human that can happen in the human experience. It's truly awful, especially in states like mine where we don't have meaningful attorney conducted voir dire. Only the judge can ask questions. We're not allowed to. And so we really just have to kind of look at people, size them up, and make like a split second decision about how we think they would be to our clients. So yeah, no, that happens a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah. And trust me, I wasn't trying to say that like people want Karen Reed to be innocent if she is innocent or Koberger. And that's not me even like being a wuss right here. I just was trying to talk about the power of the news and the power of what people put out and how it can influence a jury.
Well, and I think in Koberger's case, frankly, I mean, I don't know how much, maybe Allie can comment on this too, but in Koberger's case, let's say that the jury doesn't have enough to feel like they can convict this guy, if that was somehow possible. Let's say they didn't. How are they going to feel that nobody is going to be held accountable for 4 people being killed? Those girls are, and the young man are dead, and somebody needs to be held accountable, right? So at the end of the day, is there a tendency to want to just have somebody go down for this?
Yep. Somebody has to pay. Somebody has to answer for this. And weirdly, this always has driven me nuts. Don't be mad at my client who was falsely accused of this crime. Be mad at the cops and the prosecution who didn't get it right enough to arrest the right person. So don't take it out on my client because the cops didn't do their freaking job. You get upset with the prosecution because they had tunnel vision and they pursued the wrong person. But yes, that is very real especially when there's a heinous crime with very sympathetic victims, beautiful little college girls and a college boy. Yes, everybody feels that, right? Like parents feel that, their peers feel that. And people have this, we have this natural human reaction that we want somebody to pay, that there should be justice for the victims' families, that there should be justice for the perpetrator, that there should be retribution for the crime, that there should be punishment. Yes, and there should be all of those things in a civilized society. Yes, this is how it's supposed to work. But in a civilized society, we make sure that we get the right person and we give them due process so that we don't have false outcomes. That's the most important thing. And their rage should be directed towards people in the chain of the process who cut corners to get to the end result instead of getting to the right result. That's where they should focus their frustration or their desire for justice.
Yeah, that's well said. That's very well said, because I think what like I have on screen here, it's Trey said there's huge pressure to arrest somebody, like anybody.
Yep. Close the case, closed by arrest. That's law enforcement speak, closed by arrest. Like in meaning, hot potato, it's no longer my problem.
Yeah, exactly. And also, not to just sound like a broken record with the media, but then the police can go to the media and be like, you guys are safe. See, we got the guy. You don't have anything to be worried about. And
that's part of the problem with the alternative suspect angle is it almost feels like Hitler and everyone in America is going to be fine. If there's an alternative suspect, give us somebody who's good enough that we can put them behind bars, because somebody's going behind bars for this. So if you're going to do an alternative suspect, we better have a name and we better have enough to get him. But it was funny because somebody pointed out, do they have to have as much on the alternative suspect as they had for Koberger? Because frankly, they didn't have a whole lot on Koberger when they started that process of arresting him. So how good do they have to have of evidence of this alternative suspect to be reasonable doubt for people? And because it feels like people want to be like, the only way we're letting Koberger off is not only that you got a possible other person, but enough that we can go get that person and put them away for it.
But,
and good luck, by the way, once there's a failed prosecution for whatever reason, whether it's because the defense has done such a good job that they've actually proven, even though it's not their burden, that wasn't the right person. Good luck getting the prosecution to go back and reopen that case and reinvestigate it. Cops just, they don't want to do it, especially if it's not something that they care about, if they don't have pressure. Are either of you familiar with the Gilgo Beach murders?
Yeah.
In New York? There was the one mom who blew the lid off of the whole thing because she just wouldn't let it go, but they did not want to see what was right in front of them. And look how many people were in danger because they were just like, oh, But, same concept. If the prosecution of one person results in an acquittal, it's pretty low probability that case is going to get back on an investigator's desk for reinvestigation.
I don't know if you know the statistic off the top of your head, but I did a deep dive on where somebody's DNA, like for example, the one that you referenced with the EMT person and the finger pulse check thing. I think that in the last 3 decades, there's been like 526 people that were convicted, about to do life, where technically their DNA put them at the scene.
Yep.
And then they were actually freed by that same DNA that's theirs when it's retested later based on percentages or story or new evidence. I just, somebody had asked, what does the title of this live mean where I say DNA in court exposed? I have a couple of questions written down. And the first one that I should have asked after you said you make all of your clients do a lie detector test protected under attorney-client privilege because it's not admissible in court. But at what point do you think DNA is going to be looked at the same way in court like a lie detector is because of advancement? You don't think it'll ever be looked at? You think it'll all be relevant?
No, I think the science is strong behind DNA. What I do wish is that we would do better with the narrative that DNA is DNA, because it's not. We have to separate, this being a perfect example, we have to separate between trace DNA versus body fluids or even fingerprint evidence is kind of meh. But I don't think that we will see a time where DNA is viewed in the same way as like bite mark analysis or polygraph examinations, things like that. I think that those things have been found not to meet the standards of reliability that are required for that type of testimony, whereas the case law has shown that DNA is very much reliable, and it's not perfect, but you're right. It's been hundreds of people since we started with DNA that have been exonerated as a result. It's pretty scary stuff.
It is scary. I bring that up, and I brought my tinfoil hat over, Allie.
All right.
Sometimes if I don't put this on, people take it a little bit too serious. I don't know if you can read it, but this is from 2009. It was published in the New York Times. So this was, 16 years ago. I've brought this up a couple of times on the stream, but I wanted to get your thoughts on this as well. And it talks about how with just 425 snippets of any person's DNA, they can engineer any conceivable profile, even without having that person's original DNA. And you have the leader of this scientific journal, Dan Frumkin, says you can just engineer a crime scene and any biology undergrad could perform this. Now, I get what you're saying where DNA is going to be relevant. Differentiating the DNA is very important from a jury standpoint. But I know not everybody has access to these tools to do it, but in a high profile case, high pressure case for the state, like a Luigi case, like a Brian Koberger case, they would have access to the tools to be able to do this, especially with these giant third-party databases. I feel like the federal government can go to them and be like, we need 423 people's DNA. We need to build this dude's profile out and plant it. Now, again, that's why I have the tinfoil hat on, because I doubt our government would ever do anything and overreach someone's rights just to close a case. But I want you to listen. I'm going to play this clip for you. This is Ann Taylor talking about the DNA sample size doubling.
Mhm.
And in the article, it talks about when the DNA doubles in size, it's usually a dead giveaway that it's been manipulated because it's been put through a process.
Right, they're replicating the cells. Yeah,
exactly. So I'm going to play this. And she also has no chain of custody from when the DNA left the lab, got to the FBI, and she got surprised in court. So here is this clip.
FBI gets involved. The profile, the text file that's a snip to use to try to identify somebody is more than twice as big when it gets to the FBI from Othram. We don't know how. We don't have any notes. We don't know who did any of the work. We don't have any lab protocols. We don't have any quality assurances.
So, I mean, that right there, I feel like after Ann Taylor said that, a lot of people jumped down her throat for that, like knowing she was going to maybe go down a route of saying, hey, this could have been planted, it could have been messed with, it could have been manipulated. Have you seen a case or know of a case where DNA was planted?
Not one of my cases, to my knowledge.
Okay.
I think probably the most famous one is going to be DNA planting. I mean, just evidence containing DNA would be O.J. Simpson is the first, of course, the first one that comes to mind. But no, I've not. Thank God, I've never had that happen in my case, to my knowledge. You know, I don't think anybody. It would have to be a case that somebody cared that much about. I mean, again, here's me putting on my conspiracy theorist hat now. It would have to be a case they cared a whole lot about, to spend a whole lot of money and get a whole lot of people in on the conspiracy, and just then you've got to keep all those people quiet. That's messy.
Yeah, I know. And sometimes I like to think that it probably happens more than it does. Like, because it's a fun thought process.
Yeah.
I just feel like I don't know. I just feel like the DNA aspect, as you perfectly summed up with the story, and then with there's so many differences in what DNA means, and just the definition of touch DNA when a jury member hears it. It's so important for people to know. And I'd be curious if these people that are saying Brian Koberger's DNA is at the scene, if they just learned that definition, how many of them do you think would say, oh, well, wait, hang on, it could just be a skin cell that floated through the air and blew in the wind? Like, that's crazy to me.
And here's the other thing. Like, here's the other thing. One of the suspects in the case, in my opinion, even though he was cleared early in the case, right, is Kaylee Gonzalez's boyfriend, right? But the problem is he was in the house a lot. So by definition, his DNA is all over that crime scene, which is funny because we're trying to act like, well, Brian Koberger's DNA is at the crime scene. Let me tell you whose DNA is also at that crime scene. Jack DeCour's. No question about it.
And 100 other people. It was a college house. How many parties, how many keggers do you think they had at the house? I mean, that just, I'd be pointing to that all day long. It's a house. I mean, and it's trace DNA. It's floating around in the air. I mean, we're constantly shedding skin. We're shedding hair. We're coughing. We're sneezing. We're singing. We're talking. And those things are just around and floating. And that's all they got. It's crazy.
It is crazy. It's crazy. And it's a red flag. I just think that the way that you pick a jury in this case, like you said, is probably everything that's going to matter. Just having the death penalty off the table differentiates what type of jurors. People that typically say they're okay with sentencing somebody to death are more likely to convict in general. And so thank you for touching on that. I know you said you're a little bit newer to the Koberger case. I think you did a wonderful job, and it sounds like you definitely have gotten your feet wet, and hopefully you keep looking at it, because there's a lot of people that are like, you need to hit up Ann Taylor and tell her that. And so I just did a poll in the Hive, and I said type a 1 if you want Allie to share her thoughts on the Luigi case and sum up her thoughts on it. And there's a ton of ones that just flooded in. So I don't know if Devil's Advocates, if you want to maybe ask her a question that you guys have talked about in the past, that would be good for the Hive to kind of get a summary of it, or what. But I'll let you two kind of have the floor here.
Well, I guess for the Luigi case, just to keep it on the theme that we have right now, the prosecution recently came out and basically said in an 82-page response to a filing by Luigi's attorney that they have some of these questions that we've been asking for a long time. They've said definitively in their writing, we have ballistics match. The ballistics on the gun that Luigi had, they say, does match the ballistics that were fired at the scene. We have Luigi's fingerprints at the scene. We have his chewing gum in a backpack with his DNA at the scene. So, Allie, what are your thoughts about that DNA evidence that they're saying we've got him dead to rights? We've got his fingerprints, his saliva, and we've got the gun that literally fired the bullets in his possession. How do you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you explain it. If all of that comes in, if it survives a motion to suppress for various reasons, and that comes in at trial, I think that Luigi Mangione's defense team has an uphill battle. That being said, we don't know what Luigi's defense is at this point. And I've said this kind of from the beginning. You have, I call him Team Shaggy. It wasn't him. And then you've got Team Kendrick Lamar. Yeah, I did it. Yeah, I did it. Deserved it, right? Okay. So, but we don't know what Karen A's defense is going to be. And so if her defense is the Shaggy defense, it wasn't him, that's going to be pretty tricky if all that evidence comes in. That's going to be a lot. If her defense is somehow an argument for jury nullification of, yes, he did it, and let me try to explain to you why, then I don't think it's as consequential. So it really just depends on their strategy. It'll be really interesting to see because they have not tipped their hand on it at this point yet. Keeping all of her options open.
So devil's advocate is the one that kind of got me into the Luigi case, and he gave me a theory. I don't know if it was because of a TV show that you saw or like a simulated out event where devil's advocates. Do you remember that? It was like you said that the healthcare system actually could go on trial because it's the equivalent of like if a son killed the dad who was abusing the mom, and they're technically protecting people so they get a lesser charge if they put the healthcare system on trial by saying, hey, these insurance fraud claims or these insurance claims that aren't going through are actually killing people.
Yeah. Well,
is there a defense for that?
You're touching on two things that I've said. One, there was in my early stages, based on a documentary that came out said they lost the shooter for some time in Central Park, and then they picked up an individual that looked just like him leaving the park. I said, what if it's not the same individual? What if they swapped in somebody? Because there was multiple people they were chasing that had the same similar look, backpack on, black outfit, and they had to let some people go because they ended up following false leads. So what if this was a coordinated thing and the shooter actually got away and somebody else took the fall for it? And that was based on this idea of this movie called How to Blow Up a Pipeline, where a group of people that conspired to do something, and one of them agreed to take the fall for the whole thing. The other issue that you're referring to was oh gosh, now I'm going to lose what the other issue was. There was two things that you're playing on. The money, it was
the self-defense because it was killing people.
So that story is interesting. I'll try to be brief. Is because Law and Order, the fiction TV show, did an episode called Folk Hero, in which they depicted essentially the shooting in New York, the same exact thing. And in that, and by the way, Karen Agnifilo, who's Luigi's attorney, is an advisor on Law and Order, which makes it even more interesting, right? And so as an advisor, so the show depicts this thing, and the defense for the shooter was, yeah, he did it, but he was doing it to save lives, because every single day that the predatory healthcare system is using AI to deny claims, thousands of people are dying every single day. And so therefore, and nothing says that when you defend others for their life, that they have to be standing in front of you. So if this individual killed somebody to save thousands of people, nothing says they had to be standing in front of him when he saved their lives. So is there a defense of others argument to be made? Now, I think Allie says that's going to be a long stretch to do that. But that was, for me, like, wow, could this trial end up being a landmark case in the United States of a self-defense or defense of others kind of position, where it was done in a justifiable manner to save lives? And that was his motive for doing it, if that's the case. But
yeah, I compared it, Lee, when we talked about it to the Menendez brothers' imperfect self-defense argument that they endured essay at the hands of their parents, and that's why they committed the crime. But I think that the difficulty that Karen A would have if that's the approach that she decides to take is that type of argument, I think a judge would view as basically an argument for jury nullification, which you can't do. I think you can try to cloak it as this is the healthcare industry on trial, and Luigi did this to protect other people. If I'm the prosecution, I'm pushing back on that pretty hard. No lives were saved as a result of what you did. Brian Thompson is not actually the one. He's just this figurehead, and you can't take down the industry by taking down one person. There's going to be a number of arguments to counter that, but I think a judge will be very, very hesitant to allow that type of presentation or that type of defense, because it is essentially asking the jury to set aside what happened because they are sympathetic towards the defendant's cause, and that's not going to be allowed. So she's going to have to be really careful if that's the route she takes.
I'm glad you brought it up, because I know you probably need to get going here soon, but I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I thought was interesting was, on its own, if the defense had tried to bring up hey, he did this because the healthcare system is so bad, I would imagine they would say the healthcare system's not on trial, Luigi Mangione is. But the prosecution may have opened the whole argument, because they're saying Luigi did it because he was trying to protect people from the health insurance. So they're opening that line of inquiry in the first place, aren't they?
Well, they're not saying that he did it because he's trying to protect. They're saying that he did it to intimidate a civilian population and to impact government action. Like that is the crux of his argument in favor of this terrorism count in the New York case. And so, yes, I agree with you in spirit, but technically, and the law is very technical, I actually think what he's arguing is that it was to do those two things, which I think can be distinguished from the way that you stated it.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
So, Allie, I know, and thank you again for making some time for us. Just to close this out, I just asked the Hive if there's any questions for you, and we can let you answer a couple of them. Sure. I had one written down as far as the roommates, Dylan and Bethany, in the Idaho 4 case. A lot of people just said to ask you about them and their stories. Is that something, as a defense attorney, when you have such a conflicting statement that comes out in the PCA compared to now down the road, 2 years into the case, it's like you could wipe your ass with it. That's how wrong it was. Do you make that a pain point for the prosecution and point all that out? Or how does that work in defending your client then?
If I have a witness that has testified inconsistently in the past from what their testimony would be now, or that they changed their story, is that what you're asking me?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Oh yeah, I cross-examine the shit out of them about that.
Now, they're able to, they're going to testify, but it's, I believe you don't get to see their faces and stuff like that. I believe, right? Devil's advocates, isn't that a thing? Like there
was talk about one of them testifying from remotely or something like that.
Yeah.
Not in person, but
what? That's crazy. No, you have a constitutional right to confront your accusers.
Right.
And
not only that, but I can't even believe, I mean, I don't want to side tangent too long, but I can't even believe they would have the nuts to put Dylan on the stand. Her credibility is shot when she changed her story 4 different times under pressure from the police to change the story as they're literally coaching her. What about the guy having bushy eyebrows? Oh yeah, I think he might have had bushy. I mean, it's horrible. I can't believe they would have the balls to put her on the stand.
If it's that messy and they can make their case without it, they're not gonna subject themselves to that type of abuse on cross. They're just not. So if it's not a really necessary witness they can do without it, they're going to cut their losses and say we don't want for any of our witnesses to endure that type of a brutal cross-examination or impeachment on the stand.
Yeah, because it's crazy, Allie, because her story's changed a ton. And if she gets to maybe one of them gets to maybe testify remotely or without being seen. And then you have Bethany, who is fighting the subpoenas to come back. In my mind, I'm like, okay, well, if it's a safety thing, it's like you should technically have nothing to worry about. They caught the lone serial killer-esque incel, right? So, I mean, I don't want to go into it because it's a whole different rabbit hole, but like I personally believe there is a possibility for like WITSEC or some sort of CI involvement, hence the redacting for an ongoing parallel federal investigation. However, I'm going to look through the Hive for another question here. And let's see, what do we got?
And if I get a chance after Allie's off, I'll address Scott, who's attacking the crap out of me. I'll clarify that later when Allie's gone. If you want.
Okay. All right. One of them is, do you have where did it just go? Do you have a constitutional right to not face your accuser?
To not face your
I'm not sure what I.
Oh,
I
you
guess,
mean like because it is to not face your accuser because it's traumatic,
yeah,
or
I think that's what that person is getting at. Like, do you have a constitutional right to say I'm not going to take the stand, even though I don't know how maybe they need to clarify that more. Sorry about that.
no, that's okay. So if somebody is accusing you of something, you can choose not to cross-examine them. You can't they have a right to testify. If they're the complaining witness in a case against you, the prosecution is going to call them to testify. You don't have to ask them any questions. I don't recommend that. You definitely want to cross-examine the accusing witness. You also, you have a right not to show up to your own trial. Also, don't
Yeah, that's
recommend
true.
that. So if it's that traumatic, you don't have to go. But the jury typically doesn't like that. I hope
Yeah.
that helped in that.
Hey, Ali, I have one question from one of my users, and it's jumping back to Luigi for a second, but
Sure.
I just thought she wanted to know what happens in the New York case if Pennsylvania is not ruling on that arrest issue, which we talk about a lot. But I mean, again, like, so, we've got Pennsylvania hasn't ruled on whether or not that was a legal arrest of Luigi in Pennsylvania, but yet New York's using all the information from that.
Yeah.
Can you summarize again what you're thinking is how that's going to play out?
Yeah, so I think the court in Pennsylvania will eventually make a ruling, and I'm sure that Karen A will also raise the same issue in New York. Hopefully, there's a ruling in Pennsylvania by then. And even though they are equal courts, meaning circuit level courts, the judge in New York will give constitutional full faith and credit to the ruling by the Pennsylvania judge when it comes to that evidence, meaning you will not see, or you should not see, two inconsistent rulings on that evidence. Hopefully Pennsylvania goes first. I think that's cleaner because they've made the motion, they've brought the issue to the court's attention, that court will rule, and then I would fully anticipate that the New York Supreme Court or circuit court judge would defer to the decision of the Pennsylvania judge in whatever they decided about that evidence, and then that would stand in the New York case as well.
Interesting. Okay, here will be the last question, Ali, and thank you again. So this is probably the most asked question that I just saw. What do you think about the King Road house being torn down before the trial, as far as maybe the jury was going to get bussed out to see it? Maybe there was evidence in there. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised by that. I know that they would probably say that they went in and did a full sweep of the house and collected all relevant evidence and it's all been preserved and blah, blah, blah. But there is no substitute for a jury being not able just to, from diagrams or PowerPoints or AI generated videos, to put themselves at a crime scene. There is no substitute to putting their butts in seats in a car and driving them out to a crime scene so they can walk it themselves, so they can sit there and see things for themselves. And honestly, as a lawyer, there's no substitute for me doing that. I tried a murder case last summer where it was a club shooting, and the issue was that a person was standing outside smoking a cigarette. A gunfight broke out in the corner, and a person was hit by a bullet. They were not the intended target. And all the while, law enforcement was telling me that the surveillance footage was shooting east to north, basically, like at an angle. And as it turns out, it was actually pointing this way. I would have never known to call them on it if I hadn't gone to that club myself and been like, well, hot damn, they got the cameras.
It was mirrored. It was mirrored.
Switched. And guess what you can't do? You can't get shot in the back of the head from somebody standing in front of you, because bullets don't boomerang. And bullets don't boomerang ended up being my closing argument. And my client got acquitted because they were wrong. But I would have never figured that out if I hadn't walked the crime scene. And so there's no substitute for that. I wish they hadn't done that.
I'm so glad you just shared that. That is such a powerful story about why it's important to be at the crime scene. How loud is the house? Is it creaky?
Yes.
Can you hear stuff through the walls? How does a roommate? I know obviously we now know she wasn't asleep, but she was originally claiming she was asleep and she woke up. How do you not hear anything? So to that point, that's an epic last sentence of bullets don't boomerang, of course, unless you're JFK, but that's a story for a different time.
Hey, we're finally admitting that wasn't
hat back on.
I need to put my hat back on. Yes, you're right. God, Ali, I could talk your ear off all night, but I know you are a busy woman, like I said. So thank you for taking an hour here to spend some time with the Hive Mind. I'm sure that they enjoyed it. I know I very much so did. And if you have any plugs for yourself, if you have like a website, if you have anything for your own social media, I don't know if you do, but feel free.
Follow me on TikTok. It's pretty easy. It's just at Ali Benevento. I am not up on YouTube yet, but at Ali Benevento, and same thing on Instagram at Ali Benevento _SLF for Strom Law Firm, which is my firm. So I'd love for you to follow along with my content. That'd be great.
Absolutely, we will. And I would love to have you back on after a couple, maybe more of these hearings get going in the Idaho case. And thank you so much, Devil's Advocates, for connecting Ali and I. And Devil's Advocates, if you have anything you want to say to Ali before she pops off, feel free.
No, just thank you, Ali, for coming on. It was a pleasure talking to you as always. So I'm excited that you got to get in front of a bigger audience and share your message, because I see a lot of people really appreciated it. So thank you again.
Well, I'm so glad. Thank you so much. I appreciate you gentlemen both. Thanks.
Absolutely, Ali. Have a great night.
You too. Take care.
Yep. Bye-bye. Man, how cool was that, Hive? She is a badass. You could just tell. So Devil's Advocates, thank you again for hooking that up, man. I think that was a really, really great guest to have on, and very good perspectives on how the mind of a defense attorney thinks. And I got to tell you, when I asked her about like a moral compass kind of thing, the way that she answered that about like, no, my job is to defend a client's rights. That was freaking powerful, man, because, and I saw in the Hive, it just absolutely blew up when she said that, of like, that's a great answer.
Right.
And
yeah.
I don't know if you answered that. How did you and Ali meet? Did she defend you for some sort of case, or?
I wow, what a right to the thing. Like
I'm just saying, I don't know.
I was on the cusp for a quadruple murder, and she kind of helped me out of that situation. But no, I found her on TikTok, and I was asking my followers on TikTok, who would you like to see me go on with? And people said, well, this Ali chick's covering the Luigi case, and you guys talk really similar. Why don't you try to get her on? And she's super, super down to earth. She was like, I'd love to. And she's been on several times. Everybody loves her take. I have another attorney, the same thing. Another attorney, Cynthia Thornton, who's an attorney in New York and Texas. And she came on the show several times with me as well. They just we're super down to earth ladies that just want to talk about the stuff. So it's been cool.
Yeah, no. And I saw we got another attorney in here. I think it's the Southern Blonde Lawyer. So, I mean, it's really interesting, and it's really awesome to get to hear defense attorneys' mindsets on it. Shit, there's an ex-prosecutor. I'd even like to have them on. I mean, and it's also, it's a definite tip of the hat to the Hive for, just kind of the mindset that we have and the way that we go about it, because it is breeding a true open discussion. Like, I mean, there was things that I said where Allie's like, you got to put that tinfoil hat back on, type thing, which I like that. I can appreciate that. And so I guess Devil's Advocate, if you're okay with this, I know you said you had to call somebody out in your chat that was lighting you up. If you want to do that quick, I will get back to the last of the Hive Mind finds quick, because there's two really interesting ones.
And I saw a couple people said I'm echoing. Am I still echoing, or only when I?
No, you're good now.
Okay. Maybe when I get excited and I shout, I start to echo something somewhere. But I just wanted to comment. So I had a guy in here that was calling me on the whole, Dylan was talking about bushy eyebrows from the first moment, and who is this moron talking kind of thing. I want to clarify about that whole situation. One, it came out in court documents that Dylan had some kind of obsession with bushy eyebrows and had all kinds of pictures of bushy eyebrows. She watched true crime and she was obsessed with it. She said one time under oath, I was really drunk. I'm not sure I dreamt the whole thing. I'm not even sure if it happened. Then I may have saw two eyebrows. I might have saw one eyebrow. Every time she talks to the law officers, that story changes. The story about the balaclava that he supposedly wore was basically a word that they put in and said, was it this? And showed her. And she's like, yeah, it could have been that kind of thing. And so I understand you calling me on the carpet, trying to act like Dylan's story hasn't changed. That's bullshit. Her story has changed over and over and over. I just have to be blunt. It's changed over and over again. Watch the documents, read the documents. Her story changes. It changes at least 4 times. And again, she's admitted under oath, I was drunk. I may have just dreamt the whole thing. I'm not even sure it happened. That's enough said right there. Yeah.
Do I need to give that dude the clown horn? I'm I'm ready at all times. I keep this thing on me.
And normally I'm not that rude to somebody, but when somebody calls me a clown or tells me who is this moron, I sometimes I bristle a little bit. So I bristled. Thank you for giving me the chance to fire back a little bit. I wanted to clarify the points for people who haven't heard that before.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You know, we sit up here. I don't know if you saw me get called names in that Hive Mind find. Now I tried to use it and make the bigger point, which might have been confusing, about 4chan language and the talk and the tells of language and how it might be a Fed posting to throw stuff off of an investigation, whatever. But I digress. So I'm glad that you got to call him out. Sometimes it's needed, and it's probably what others in the chat are thinking when they see it as well, what you just said. So this was a really I get so many of these in the Hive Mind finds where people just want to share their thoughts. And again, I'll never share your name, but if you have a story or something about a case, this is quote unquote just a thought from a mom. And I thought it was just good perspective. So they say, "Hi there. I just wanted to write about my experience with a son that is very high functioning after listening to the show. I wouldn't want my son to testify. He's very smart, kind, and polite, but he is very matter of fact. He used to correct his teachers when they would say, quote unquote, yesterday I said this. And my son would say, quote unquote, no, actually you said this, and repeat exactly what she said the day before. He wasn't trying to be disrespectful. His mind just locks in details and he would correct it. He won't back down when he knows he is correct. I always said I needed an in-house attorney when he was little, because if I said you can't do this, he would find a loophole and say, but you didn't say that. He does process things quickly, but may respond in a completely different way due to being literal. So I could see questioning at trial being difficult. Just a thought from a mom." And I just thought that was a really good take, because anybody that maybe has a high functioning son or daughter with autism or is on the spectrum probably watches a couple of those traffic stops, and they can visualize that with their own family member. And
right. And this is the big argument, right? Is that the defense wants to be able to tell the jury about autism spectrum disorder, because they're going to look at Brian Koberger and they're going to see a flat, cold look on his face. They're going to see him not reacting with emotion when horrific things are shown on screen, and he's going to look like he doesn't give a shit. And that's part of the condition. He's got a flat affect, as they say. And if the defense is not allowed to explain to the jury how people with autism spectrum disorder present, they're going to view that as a sign of guilt. That he looks cold, he looks dead, he doesn't look to give a shit, or his reactions aren't appropriate in the moment. Same thing with this kid correcting a teacher when probably it was better to shut your mouth, but he can't help himself because that's part of the condition. That's the way their brain thinks. So yeah.
Yep, I agree. Now this next Hive Mind find, if you got headphones, put them in. This first clip at 19 seconds, I've never heard this. We've done a ton of audio breakdown on this 911 call. I feel like it's layered. I don't even know if it's the real 911 call, but this person has, I guess, a different filter, a filter that you can hear it. It sounds more realistic. I guess sometimes you put filters on, devil's advocates. What I'm trying to say is, like, sometimes it's like, well, okay, it sounds a little weird. You can hear it. You can make it out.
Yeah.
When you hear, I fucked up so clearly in this. So I will play it. Let me know if you can hear it.
Come on, you gotta go check. No, we have to.
Can you hear it, devil's advocate?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. Here we go. Let's restart it. It's at 19 seconds. Listen for I fucked up, and then hopefully you guys can see the other ones on the screen.
Yeah, I'll come. Come on, you gotta go check. No, we have to. Go.
I mean, you can hear it.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's just interesting because it's just like heavy breathing. It's like, I fucked up. You know what I mean? Like, so
right.
The other ones you can't. I didn't make any of those out, and I had headphones on, so I trying to just get through these. You know what? I'll let it play. It's a minute and a half, but that was the main one that I wanted to show.
He's not waking up. Okay, one moment. I'm getting help started that way. Okay, thank you.
What does that sound like to you?
What do you need, or what is it saying?
I hear why. I thought it was why did you shoot someone?
Mm.
Now you guys might have confirmation hearing bias now, but that's what I hear.
Okay, and how old is she? She's 20. 20, you said? Yes, 20. Here's one. Okay. Yes, 20. Here's one. Okay. Yes, 20. Said? Yes, 20. Here's one. Okay.
So again, every time you listen to that 911 thing, you hear weird stuff. And then now, devil's advocate, I saved this one for last because were you on the stream at times when we were talking about how on the Linda Lane footage, there was a lot of people that speculated that said, like, I've seen I see you, Farley, or I see you, Rosie, right? There's kind of a debate on do you hear that name?
Yeah, I wasn't on your live for that, but I'm familiar with that audio portion. But
yeah, yep. So now this was another hive mind find. I hope you all know I put these on because they're interesting. We can all take with a grain of salt when somebody sends you something that they knew somebody or they had a cousin that knew them and yada, yada, yada. But this is interesting. It said, hi, Kaylee was allegedly dating a Moscow police officer with the nickname Rosie, Sergeant Rosinski. She stopped because she found out he was married and having a baby. I believe it was him allegedly stalking Kaylee. My niece was friends with Kaylee and Maddie. She and Maddie were working on a marketing project. Both their majors, and I think Kaylee was doing a general BA. And in Kaylee's same sorority and same grade. So there's potentially a real connection there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. She lived in the house the year before. Okay. Now I'm starting to think like, okay, but it's considered a live out house for Greek life. She moved a few houses down at the time of the murders. The campus put them in a hotel the evening of November 13th. She and two other friends went to the corner bar after having a small party at the house earlier. They all rode together. My niece's friends went home, and Kaylee and Maddie decided they wanted to go get food. Allegedly, all of this, when Kaylee and Maddie went home, Kaylee, I'm not sure if Maddie was with her, but Kaylee took her dog out of the crate and took it outside near the woods to use the bathroom. Kaylee reportedly was freaked out and she felt like somebody was watching her in the woods. And then I think of the Linda Lane footage when people say, you hear Rosie's name or you hear Farley's name.
Right.
And I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. And they specifically mention lets the dog out of the crate. So that could also answer no blood on the dog.
Right. If it was crated or if it was in the door with the door shut or in the room with the door shut. Or,
yeah. And she said Sergeant Rosinski, and people are saying it's Rosendahl. So, but I just think that that's interesting because there's a couple little things when you look at it through that lens, it could be, wow, that's pretty crazy.
It is. And I want to, how do I say this? So what's interesting about breaking down the 911 calls and isolating sounds and all the different isolating sounds is that would help us true crimers on the outside, right, start to look for leads. But I doubt that Ann Taylor is going to get that deep in these audios, right? So while it might help us figure out what really happened that night, the real question is going to be, what is Ann Taylor going to dig into, and what, because I don't know that the defense is going to isolate audio and try to have a jury hear things like that. So it does help us to try to get leads on what really happened. But I think ultimately the real evidence has to probably come somewhere else, because it's just too sketchy for a jury to, everybody's going to put on their headphones and they're going to hear different things, especially, again, like you said, if you have a prosecutor say, oh, this is what you actually heard, then they're going to hear that. So it's going to become really hard. It does help us internet sleuths, but I don't know if it's going to get presented in a jury at that level.
Yeah. And a lot of people are saying that the crate was packed in the car. I understand that. The crate was packed in the car when the cameras arrived, everybody. There's 8 hours.
Yeah.
Who's to say it didn't get moved into the car? Who's to say that the dog didn't get put into the crate in the car? We don't know. And they're like, well, Christy said this. Well, Christy also, before the interview started, in one time, she goes, we got to get this right. And then Steve, so I'm not trying to say that everybody's always lying all the time. I'm just saying, look at how many discrepancies have already been in this case. Would anybody be surprised if somebody moved a dog crate out of the house to get the dog out of the house before everyone showed up? I don't think it's that far.
And here's the other thing too. Like, there are ways to make multiple statements that seem untrue at the time be true, like correct. Like, for example, the dog either was in the crate or wasn't in the crate. Well, some people will say, oh, well, they said in such and such document in court that the dog was on the bed. That doesn't mean necessarily the dog wasn't in a crate on the bed. So both conditions could be correct, right? So you have to start thinking and process that. Is there any way in which this could be true? Why is the dog not covered in blood? The crate would be an answer to that. But wait a minute, he was on the bed. Well, do we know for sure then that the crate wasn't on the bed? Because that would answer both of those questions. So we have to kind of like think it all through. Is there any way for all of these things to be correct? And when they're not, that's when we got a problem.
The Southern Blonde lawyer sent me an email with a working document that she had. She said she hadn't updated it in over a year, but it was back from the beginning. She had her questions listed out. And one of them was as simple as, what type of clothing were the victims found in? Was it with sleepwear, or was it in the clothes that they went out in? Were the wounds done by somebody who was right-handed or left-handed? And she had some other questions on there. But when you start looking through the lens that you just said, where it's kind of like double speak, both can be true. Well, those questions are very specific. So how could you, when you say, how does the dog not have blood on it? I don't know if you could double speak that answer.
Right. Well, yeah, right. He either was in the crate or locked behind a door, or he wasn't. And if he was free, he'd have blood on him, period. But another example, just riffing off the top, the whole multiple weapons were used. Another thing that can't, and I'm just playing devil's advocates. I like to be fair with both sides of the equation, right? So one knife can be used for a pointy stabby or a slashy or an overhand cut or an underhand cut. And so they use terms in the legal documents consistent with. The cuts were consistent with this type of knife, or consistent with that type of knife. So now it's hard, because you have to also ask yourself, okay, when you say, well, these wounds are completely different with these wounds, the other question has to be asked, is it impossible for that knife to have made that other type of wound? Or is there a way you could hold the knife in a different way of slashing that would create that kind of wound with the same knife? So does it prove there was more than one weapon? Again, I'm not trying to discredit the more than one weapon, because I tend to believe that there was more than one person in the house and more than one weapon was used. I tend to believe that. But you have to ask the question, can one weapon provide multiple styles of wounds so that it's consistent with two different types of weapons when it's just really the same weapon, just held differently?
Yeah. I tried to go down a rabbit hole before this stream, because we've been focusing a lot on those 4chan rumors with the frat. And then obviously getting that email made me think, well, what other 4chan rumors are there that don't have to do with the frat? And I found one. Oddly enough, I took it off because I read that. I'm like, well, I don't want to just say this. And then, so I'm going to keep that for a different stream, but I can still summarize it. And it was a theory on that somebody like was hiring Brian Koberger to be his tutor.
Mm-hmm.
And that they were doing, like Brian Koberger was teaching him how to do this surveillance thing. How are you going to think about someone thinking? And essentially this guy played Brian Koberger and was setting him up from the beginning that Brian Koberger thought he was just spending time with him. They would go out late in the night. They'd watch people's behaviors. They'd think about how they would think, and that guy ended up actually doing the killing, and the sheath was the plant for Koberger the whole time. And, you think about that, it ties in a lot of people saying Brian was the driver. It ties in maybe how the knife got there. If this guy was over at Brian Koberger's house and was tutoring him, who's to say he didn't, slip it off? Who's to say he didn't influence Brian potentially purchasing it? Who's to say all these things? It is a good exercise to think through that. And maybe that's why Brian said, I'm being set up, or I'm going to be exonerated, and yada, yada, yada. Right.
I mean, I love this case in the sense that there are so many things to investigate and to go down. It's just, it's crazy. I haven't seen a case with this many crazy possible scenarios,
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people too, like, I think what Jason's referencing with golf, like there's been, I've seen some crazy images of rumors of golf clubs where you see somebody laying across the bench and stuff like that. But to your point, yes, there is a hell of a lot of stuff that has happened that could lead to a hell of a lot of explaining of what really went down in this.
Hey, Birdie, could you pin? Allie was just saying when she left, she's like, "Hey, I wanted people to see how to follow me. Can we pin that comment?"
Yeah, what is it? Quick.
It's I posted it just a few up. It says, for those who are interested in Allie Benevento, follow at Allie Benevento at TikTok.
Here we go. There you go, folks, and happy to do that.
I got to make sure I don't have any spelling typos. It looks good. That's what you need to follow on Insta and TikTok if you want to follow Allie Benevento. By the way, I am twisting her arm to get on TikTok pretty soon. However, she's got a coworker who promised to get her set up on YouTube and port over all her videos from TikTok, and that person's kind of dragging their feet a little bit. So she's been waiting for him to do it, but she is going to get on YouTube as well.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you to that Southern blonde lawyer. That Google Doc is incredible. And I agree that Allie was, as you said, amazeballs. Yeah, that was an awesome guest. And what I'm gonna do, Hive, I'm gonna post this full stream. I'm then gonna just do the interview with Allie as a separate video as well. I think that video probably deserves its own video because there's a lot of really good information. And I think sometimes if you don't follow the Hive and the chat, you see a 2.5 hour video and you're like, oh, I don't got time for that. So if I could just do, the 45-minute segment, I think that'll help really get the word out on DNA, or touch DNA means not what everybody thinks it means. I just can't believe that story that she told about the drunk homeless guy and the EMT with the pulse finger meter led to him being incarcerated and then exonerated. And
because a jury said the same thing that they're saying at Koberger's. Well, he has to have done it. How do you explain his DNA being under the fingernail of the victim? Well, that's how you explain that one.
Yeah, I agree. So devil's advocate, I have a tinfoil hat conspiracy of the day, and I have been chomping at the bit to show you this one. I know that there is a lot of people that, and don't worry, in the hive mind, I see this stuff about the psychics coming through and people sending me videos on that. To be honest, I watch a lot of those on TikTok. I'm going to start maybe mixing those in a little bit into the hive mind finds. Some of them are just long clips. You know what I mean? Like if you listen to like the psychic reading ones, it takes a long time to get into it and give the background. But this might scratch the itch for those folks, and it's all about like astral projection. It's essentially big salt. Okay, big salt has defense ties. Okay, so salt giants are allegedly working with shadow agency to keep you spiritually offline, and that there's compounds in today's salt that did not used to be there. You think about in the olden days, it's like pink Himalayan salt and much different types of compounds, that these compounds actually block access to lucid dreaming and higher consciousness, because the modern salt or commercial salt is laced with additives that suppress dream recall and pineal gland activity. And now that is actually a fact. That's proven. There's studies on that. So look, that's why I love my tinfoil hat, because when I see that and people connecting the dots online, I'm like, whoa. You think that a government wouldn't want their people to go to a higher consciousness and just stay fluoridated, mouth-breathing zombies? And hey, we could actually even block their higher consciousness while they sleep. Let's put a little bit of a black budget together to make sure that we could stay in control and rule over them forever.
I wouldn't rule it completely out, just like I wouldn't rule out there's something behind the frequency of our music that keeps us out of sync with the resonance that our brain most is efficient at. There's all kinds of things that indicates that we're being basically dumbed down. And to kind of go along with that, I don't know if the group will think that I'm making a stretch here, but this was the same thing that happened during the 60s, acid revolution, is when people started to do psychedelics, their consciousness was expanded, and all of a sudden they were like, man, why are we killing each other? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And the government was like, we've got to shut that shit down. We can't have people spiritually evolving. So the answer to the question is, would the government not want us to spiritually evolve? Absolutely, because it's not good for business to have people who don't want to go to war, fight battles, kill other people, and do those things. And so I guess that would be my conspiracy, is there would be a motive for keeping the public from being too awakened or growing and evolving because it's a danger to business.
Yeah, I've always said this. I truly believe to my core that our body's abilities to have way higher levels of consciousness or way higher functioning capabilities, even just physically, not mentally, we are being attacked at all angles, from air quality to public water sources to food additives that are hormone disrupting. One of the things that I would say in my age group, right? So I'm 31, and I would say like my age group spans from 25 to 45, right? There are so many people my age that are having trouble getting pregnant. Way like an amount that's like, holy cow. And it's young, healthy, in shape people. And it's always come back to these hormone disrupting additives in the food. Now, I could go down the rabbit hole of its population control and yada, yada, yada. But in general, I don't even like necessarily that that's where people go to deflect that issue is, oh, what, you think that Bill Gates is trying to depopulate the world? Well, I do, but hang on. There's still a bunch of hormone disrupting shit in our food that we need to get out of it. And why are we not talking about it?
Yeah. And the bottom line is that we're a greed-based society. So they're not doing things for people's benefit and well-being. They're doing things for profits and that may extend to social engineering and keeping the population a certain way, which is basically dumbed down workers that are just smart enough to push buttons and levers, but not smart enough to break free of the system. There's my conspiracy added to that.
I agree. I mean, I could go all like, people be like, that's what Alex Jones says. Well, there's a lot of shit that Alex Jones was right about. And there's obviously some stuff that he's probably very wrong about, as we've seen, right? So, but ultimately, I mean, yeah, I just see LC talked about, Monsanto, and there are so many things, chat, that I would recommend getting the Yucca app. YUKA is the one that I use personally. You can scan a barcode and it gives you a score. It could be for hygiene products. It could be for food, and you could scan the barcode and it lets you know on, I think, a score of 10, but it breaks down what ingredients are in it, what are those potential side effects, yada, yada, yada. And it's a really interesting app, whether you consistently use it. But I know, like, my wife and I have used it for various reasons. And she used to use it when she grocery shop. Now she kind of just knows. Have you ever used anything like that, Devil's Advocates? Or like,
no, but it sounds pretty cool. I should check that out.
Yeah. So
that sounds cool.
Yeah. What else you want to talk about tonight? You got anything, or are you ready to get done with this?
Oh, I'm probably spent. I mean, we didn't talk about the Wenatchee case, but I think we've done so much damage tonight. I think, like you said, we don't want to bury the attorney we had on here with such a long feed that nobody would watch it, although you're going to break it out. But I think I'm good if you are. I could go a little longer if you want to, but I feel like we've covered a lot of territory tonight.
No, it was a great stream, man, and I'm already looking forward to next Monday. This worked out so much better with you and me being able to both stream to each other's profiles. So I'm glad that we had that worked out. It only took us a month and a half, but hey.
Hey, well, you
We
had to
get it.
convince me to get the StreamYard, so that works out. And I apologize real quick to my group. I've had a lot of chat going on here. We can't possibly keep up with all the chat that's going on, and I tried to do my best, but I know there's a lot of you out there that probably are like, man, he's not even going to look at my thing. And I try to keep up, but we've got two simultaneously chats running here, and Birdie's chat's rolling with my chat, and it's sometimes I don't even know which chat is talking at the time. So I'll work all that out as well as we move forward.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I'm working on a couple of things I'm trying to be better at it. Like I was going to do a membership, but I've made the choice. I'm going to keep every stream free. So with that being said, obviously there's a faster moving chat, right? And so we're going to do our best with it, but Devil's Advocate, if you want to hop down, that's why I've started to do the 10-minute Q&A here at the end to try and call out some of those questions. So for my chat, with you in here, I know you've been on a handful of times now, but where can everybody find you at? Do you want to type it into the box and I'll put it on the screen?
You mean my channels, you mean?
Yeah, your channels. Yep.
Oh yeah, sure.
No, where do you live? Where do you live? Tell us your address.
Yeah, come on over. I've got some drinks ready to go.
Yeah.
So I'll type in @Devil's Advocates.
Maybe if you wrote me a check, I could find out your address from the check. Just don't.
You wouldn't even have to work that hard. So anyway, yeah, there's my channel on YouTube. If you're not following and if you're interested in following Devil's Advocates 2024, I'm on TikTok, but like Birdie, I'm kind of moving away from TikTok. I'm getting tired of getting restricted on TikTok. So tonight's the first time, actually, Birdie, that in months that I did not go simultaneously broadcast to TikTok. I said, screw it. I'm getting banned every time or restricted every time I go. So I just decided to focus only on YouTube, so I don't have to worry about the technical glitches over there. And I'm trying to work out fixing that. But so I'm not done with TikTok. I'm going to start making some new content for TikTok and try to get my algorithm restarted over there. But for the time being, this is it. You're only going to see me on YouTube primarily for long form content. So if you want my long form content, please check that out on my website, devilsadvocates.info.
Yeah, love it, brother. And I will see you next Monday night.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on again.
Yep, no problem, my man. See ya. All right, Hive, let's get into some questions here. I don't know if Phoenix is in here. I haven't if she wants to come up, obviously. Phoenix, here you go. Coming in the chat now. Yeah, she's in here. Nice. What'd you guys think about that? I thought that was such a quality conversation with Allie, and Devil's Advocate has such good takes on it. Somebody said he talks on speed dial. I love it. You could tell the guy is super passionate about the research that he does and the cases that he's into. So for everybody that has supported the streams and is in here nightly, just know that I get stoked whenever I have a guest coming on where it's like a surprise guest with Allie. I don't know about you guys, but I think I should try to do that more often, just as far as perspectives. I don't know. Would you guys like that? Where it's like I said, if anybody knows like ex homicide detectives or ex FBI, I mean, I've been trying to get my cousin on who does some DEA stuff, but he's still active, so probably won't be able to get him on. But you guys know what I'm saying. So I think that those streams are so probably great to listen to, but also for me as getting up here and putting together the slides and anticipating it, I enjoy having questions ready for them that we've talked about at lengths, that now we actually get to hear it from an expert like Allie. And if you guys haven't checked out Allie's resume, dude, she's legit. She is legit. And I would love to just sit and listen to some of the stories of the cases that she's done. And yeah, I agree, Robin. Personally, I agree, and it's nothing against the other content creators that I have up, but it's a great mix up, and it's a great, because you get such an authentic version of them inside their career. Like I loved that she felt super comfortable with the Hive, and whatever. I thought it was great. So thank you all for your questions and for being such amazing hosts with me while having Allie and Devil's Advocates on. I appreciate it. What's Gucci, my Louie?
That was an awesome live.
Yeah, it was great. She's a badass, huh? You there?
Yeah, just amazing. I mean, what a connection, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
It gave me a break and I got to listen in while I got some things done.
yes, exactly. So, Phoenix, um, I'll give you the floor a little bit here. It could be about anything we talked about or any questions that you had seen in the hive if you were in here the whole time. Um, to kind of wrap this up, I think again, I got to give you a shout out for this idea at the end of every stream, because what Devil's Advocate was kind of saying about his stream of, hey, sorry, not getting everybody. I hope that this helps people with questions feel like we can now just focus on the chat.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. And an order came out today that was so mysterious because it was an order sealing an order that was done on June 5th. And I'm like, well, what was the order that came out on June 5th? But it references all these, IRE rules of law. And I'm going through all of them, and it's for privacy and jury and all these other things. And I'm going through everything that was cited. And I'm thinking to myself, why do they still want to be so mysterious about this? What is going on? Did anybody happen to see that?
I saw it in the chat. I didn't see the actual things though.
Yeah, just really odd the way that this order is now referencing another order that was made, but that you don't see the other order. So did something happen that we missed? Or because remember, this is supposed to be a public case. You're supposed to be able to see things that are moving along. In this case, we have so much has been hidden. Is it because they made a mistake a long time ago and thought, oh, we better shut everybody up or else this is going to get derailed?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I thought it was interesting that, and I had known Phoenix at Allie wasn't super into the Idaho 4 like we are, and Luigi was her main thing, but I was still interested in having her on to answer those basic questions like what you just said. Is I thought this was a public case. This is supposed to be out in the open.
Yeah,
so
I mean, if you think of old day case trials, right? They would be out in the public square, and everybody would hear what they were accused of, and not like today, like not formally, but I'm just saying back then everybody knew what somebody was being accused of and what their sentence would be and all that good stuff. But nowadays I think because it's been, in my humble opinion, it's been so messed up, they can't reel back. The only remedy is to delay.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. And man, I would be so curious if we could like somehow task her and that Southern blonde lawyer that are in here to give like a closing argument. Wouldn't that be kind of cool to hear? Like coming from an actual defense attorney.
That would be awesome.
How she was like,
I mean,
bullets don't boomerang. I'm just like, I already know she's got the jury in the palm of her hand, probably giving those arguments.
absolutely. She is one smart cookie, though. I mean, if you could see the wheels turn fast, and she is like right on it. When you get that good in your career, it just comes right out. Like when you go sell stuff, right? It just comes right out. So a couple of things that happened that I've been looking deep into is they had summoned someone from Pennsylvania that happens to be ex-military, and somebody just mentioned in the chat, Brandon. And I'm wondering if this is the secret witness that they have up their hand, that basically they're going to show in court that, he was in the 82nd Airborne. He does home sales. He's a real estate agent. He caters to veterans, but he also works for a company that's in the IT industry that's really interesting. And I wonder how Brian Koberger knows this guy that just happened to be in the 82nd Airborne.
Yeah, there's a big military connection potentially, right?
And yes, and Kopaka's ex-girlfriend. So, that's always added into the Tim DeWolf, the frat at Sigma Chi, and a couple of other people that I've dug into today. I mean, the boxer, that has a gym that Kopaka used to box at. Yeah. I could see from like maybe a character witness. But there's some interesting stuff. And I came across a TikTok you're not going to believe. It is the frats talking about white privilege.
What's the context?
I'm going to have to play the video for you in my next video.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, you got to be kidding me.
Or I could also just throw it on the Hive Mind Find. I mean, there's been a lot of stuff just in general about why does this case get attention? Why does it not? I tend to stay away from those arguments because unless whatever your video is going to show is different, I'll obviously watch it and show it if you think it's something the Hive should see.
It's interesting the people that are in this video.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's watch it then. So if you want to email me it,
Yeah.
But let's see here. Chat, what questions do you all have for Phoenix and I real quick? Let's see.
I saw you showed that book that I can't remember her name at the top of my head. The book about the souls. She sent that to me last night. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, my mouth was
After
on
watching
the floor.
that video.
Phoenix, I watched the whole thing after the stream.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I couldn't stop. It was just forward and backwards. It was weird.
Oh,
it was weird.
Can I be honest? I had a nightmare last night. That's how sensitive I am. And I must have just prayed up a storm before bedtime. And my husband's like, you were tossing and turning. And I said, yeah, I woke up a couple times. But I think for me, it was the subliminal shit that was going on.
Yeah. I mean, luckily the nightmares haven't hit me yet, but I didn't watch it with headphones. So anyways, I want to answer 5 Green Acres question about why do you think Ann Taylor would agree to the house demo? Now, let's not forget that Ann Taylor did get to go to the scene.
Yes.
But the question that we asked Allie, who is our guest tonight, was just in general, like how important is it that maybe the jury could have been through there? And then she told a very interesting story about how she went to the scene of a case where she had her client exonerated of a shooting at a nightclub, because when she went to the scene, she noticed that the camera was mirrored. So it actually showed it going from a different direction. And when she got there, she's like, wait, the camera's pointing this way. Very similar to at times when you've seen even in the Karen Reed case, when they realized that the camera's mirrored and stuff's on the opposite side. So I think Ann Taylor going there by herself, maybe in her mind was enough to get that. Now, I don't know about the jury aspect, but Allie said that, no AI reconstruction video model or dollhouse would ever obviously do that from being in there and feeling it. But she kind of leaned towards the point of as long as she could go there as the defense attorney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and I think that was smart for Ann Taylor to stop that mess and say, no, I need to go walk through this. She took a couple people, took videos, they took notes, took pictures, whatever needed. And I think that was a smart move. So it just solidifies, I'm sure, some of the questioning that she's going to ask DM and BF.
mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I don't know. Ann Taylor would have probably had to have at least agreed to the timeline, maybe hence why she got out there when she did.
Yeah, probably. I mean, if they wanted to hurry up and demolish it and wipe it clean, get rid of everything possible, if you go back and look at the filing, she definitely had a problem with it. So I guess the remedy was that she went out there and walked it, surveyed it.
Yeah. Somebody, April just asked, do you think that Dylan knew and she was offered immunity if she would testify like the cops wanted her to? Man, this is a layered question where I don't know specifically for Dylan, but you guys, if you've ever watched cases about false confessions and the videos of police in interrogation rooms while they're being filmed, not expecting maybe that it would come back and bite them in their ass with their interrogation tactics. I feel like that's not a stretch to think, no, if you help us, you'll get a lesser sentence. That shit gets said all the time.
I don't think they're going to get any lesser sentence. I think they have full immunity. And if they offered them immunity, obviously now they're under court ordered. Well, one of them is to come to the trial and testify. But I question some of these summons about the other people that they're summoning. I mean, could they be summoning the people they think that did some of this?
Yeah. You know, what's so wild is if you were in here, Phoenix, for when I read that email I got about how I'm an idiot for not knowing the difference between titties and titties in 4chan and the language.
Yeah.
Were you in here for that? Yeah.
I was.
Yeah. Okay. But the point, like I said, I was making is that feds use anonymous 4chan posts and they've been caught before doing it. Right. To your point is, as I was reading that, I thought to myself, now, yes, the frats and everybody were up to stuff. I just go back to, if that all was a distraction, and with how many different angles this case has had, don't you think we'd know about the roommates? Don't you think we'd know about the frats for sure by now?
You know, my question to all that was, who sent that to you? What was their end game? And by saying that and calling it out, were you to believe that there were fed bots now?
Well, I don't know, because they asked if I was purposefully muddying the water with obvious fed posts. Now, and I'm just like, I can actually, here, I'll read you guys my response.
I didn't get your response.
Yeah, I said, where is it? I said, yo, I gotta admit, I had no idea about the titties versus titties thing. I'm clearly not fluent in 4chan speak and had no clues that I was apparently wading knee deep in fed posting. Brutal. But I said, but I genuinely appreciate you breaking it down. As much as it pains me to say, if that's true, I have been gullible on the 4chan posts. I didn't know what I was looking at. I said, would it be cool if I brought this up on stream? I'm not going to say your name or anything, but it is a good lens for the quote unquote, you're getting played angle that people should hear, right? Like, that was his opinion. Now, I didn't like that he called me names.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, he called me a tard, and that I'm a
they were just gaslighting you. I'm just,
yeah.
I mean, if you want, who was it that sent, was it somebody from the frat that, you know, because remember, Birdie, these were so important, they were scrubbed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to dox this guy or anything, but yeah, it looks like a full name. I haven't had a chance to look it up yet, but
yeah, but I'm just saying, I mean, for somebody to call you out like that just seems kind of odd, you know, instead of, hey, I think, you know, 4chan is no longer, it's not around. So for them to be scrubbed and gone, and for somebody to email you because you brought those posts up, were they triggered because you brought those posts up?
Maybe.
Or were they trying to enlighten you? Because that didn't sound like any enlightenment to me.
Yeah, no, it really didn't. It really didn't. But I guess it was more so just like, that seemed like one of those, to me, the level of detail and the stuff that was pointed out in those, I'm like, wouldn't the feds could they frame somebody in a 4chan post? Like, what if somebody found out it was the feds?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I think that people just have too much time on their hands sometimes. And they're just like trying to gaslight you. I think that's all it is, because you gotten really close. I mean, really super close, right?
I have one I didn't put on, but I'll give you guys a little teaser, because now at the same time, I I got a very interesting email that was kind of the opposite of that. Now, it says it's titled Important Info for You. Now, it says, Birdie, I'm a new subscriber. Here, I'm just gonna summarize this for everybody. So let me pull it. How do I? All right. It says, Birdie, I'm a new subscriber on YouTube, and I wish you a lot of luck with it. I feel like I finally ran into your channel by accident, but everything happens for a reason. If you could please read my whole email. I know it's long, but I have important info for you. Please do not say my name. And he talks about how he is a part of a group that it doesn't seem like it's social media based. It seems like it's more like different platform, maybe Discord, maybe Telegram, but it's the leader of this group is a retired director who was in the feds, essentially, right? So he's a retired federal agent, police detective, and for several years they go into cases of missing college students or recent grad students specifically that are happening all across the United States and Canada. They have hundreds of spreadsheets on all of our cases and a variables list of the missing college students. Some were found, some were never found. However, we focus in on all of the missing students who are always found in a river or lake, and police always ruled them an accidental drowning. Now, you got so close when you started talking about Hudson being the domino in this case.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So I feel all these students had similarities, like being very intelligent. Maybe they were into music, but, and this is a weird call out, almost all of them are Catholics.
They church related, correct.
Yep. I feel like they were waterboarded because there's no water in their lungs. Now,
I heard the same thing.
Now that sounds exactly like Hudson's. Now,
Correct.
When I tell you this is a novel, I'm not even joking you. It's like the cursor's like tiny. You know what I mean? It would take me a while. I'm trying to skim through it. So you're not going to believe this at first because I know it's far out there, but trust me when I tell you that something is happening with college students like Hudson and many others. These students' legs are put through cinder blocks so they can't move while they're being waterboarded.
Oh,
and
my
then
goodness.
I started thinking about like Ethan's legs potentially.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about. Yeah.
Wasn't there somewhere that someone said someone drowned?
I don't know, but like as far as the roommates.
Yeah, but I mean, potentially, you understand, Birdie, if the frats did do this, if allegedly, then why would they not use the same techniques that they've done before?
Well, here's the thing, because I that was just related to Hudson. I just speculated for the Ethan thing. Okay.
Yeah, but I remember someone said one of the four drowned, and I was like, "What? Drowned?"
Well, let me just finish this so I don't, because
Okay.
otherwise my brain's gonna go. You know me, and I was just speculating on Ethan for his legs. Who knows if that's true? But they lay it out, and they also talk about GHB, which if you have been following the Diddy case, I kind of put that on the map. But that's been used for a very long time.
Correct.
This is where he goes, I believe that I found a potential motive. And okay, I'm just going to read it how they wrote it. This person says, all of those kids and the people who did this crime. Wait, what is it? Oh, it gets cut off. Sorry. Okay. So they did drugs on students. They gave the students drugs while they were in their own environment. It was all part of a plan to make a different student look like the guilty one. I believe Kaylee, who was searching all about trafficking and other cases, who was also being watched and listened to from cameras inside the house, found out that this is what happened to Hudson. And she told Maddie. And so Kaylee said, Maddie, what did you tell Adam? And she said, I told him everything. Adam, in turns, tells those who were involved, and a hit is put on the house.
Yeah, but by who?
See, I don't know. And that's where it goes back to if LE was involved, if the C gang, I don't know. Who knows? But if you think, like,
weird.
what if that is what she found out?
Possible. I mean, anything's possible.
Because I go back to that 4chan post about Jackass knowing.
You know what? I wouldn't put it past Kaylee uncovering anything, because this girl was like, she loved true crime. She looked out for certain things. She had that sense of awareness around her that maybe something wasn't right. She reminds me of someone that has so much energy, so full of life. And she was very smart, but very quiet about it. And it wouldn't shock me if she did find something out like this, because wasn't she also the one that thought she saw some missing persons and reported it?
Yeah. And, people are like saying, why would she? Well, if she's into true crime and that happens in her own backyard in a frat where she's friends with people in that frat,
Mm-hmm.
and it's suspicious circumstances. There's no water found in lungs, yet they say they drowned. And now I just find it so interesting that that dude was on this list prior to the Idaho 4 happening. Hudson was on this group's list prior as being already suspicious.
So just like the other guy that was drugged, OD, came back to life, and then they drugged him again, allegedly. The frat president that was also doing investigative journalism, I forgot his name. He's another one. I wonder if, and he went to an all-Christian high school. I wonder if he was also on the list.
It could be. I am going to email him back. I didn't even have time to read through all of it. It's that long. And as I have these emails up, again, chat, a lot of people are like, are you getting my emails? I can promise you that if you spell it right, I'm getting them just based on the sheer volume. But I try to only do 3 to 5 hive mind finds and have somewhat of a theme to them. A lot of this stuff, there's a lot of Kopaka stuff. There is a lot of hive mind requests that have come in.
Yeah, Katie was the guy's name.
Oh, okay.
Emma Bailey and Demetrius, I believe, were charged with his unaliving, and then they were released out of prison. And I think that's when they became informants. So something definitely is wrong in Moscow, Idaho. That's for sure. I got some really wild hive mind finds that I'll send you. I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole today, but I did look at, a little bit about Ethan and Xana's relationship. She was much older than him. He was removed from the frat because of his academics, allegedly, and that's why he was staying with them. But you noticed in the PCA, I know how you all feel about the PCA. I believe there's a little bit of truth in there. You have to find it. They said that obviously that Ethan was a guest there. He wasn't a resident. And I always found that odd, the way they worded that.
Yeah, that is weird. And there's rumors that death, which again happened only 6 months prior, caused a lot of friction between Ethan and the other frat boys.
Absolutely. I think that maybe they all figured out what had happened because, Hudson, 19, freshman, was also known to be hanging out over at the 1112 King Road. And to answer someone's question about the King versus Queen Road address, I dug and I didn't find anything changing the name of the street at 1122 from Queen to King, because the door faces Queen Road Apartments. And if somebody has um, discovered it under the deeds or the changes or anything like that, that would be so appreciated. You Hive Mind are amazing. Some of you OGs are in here watching and listening and have given and provided us so much information to kind of put some pieces together. There's Rolo, there's only available, not available, some other key players that are listening and trying to get the word out about this case. And I did not find anything specific to King Road, the change or when it happened.
I thought it was
Because
8
even the
years.
police, even the Moscow Police Department in August went to the wrong address and they had to walk over to the other side of the street. So that's Queen Road. It's not King Road. That's always been a beef of mine.
Yeah, I agree. This is an impromptu Hive Mind find, but it's relevant. So this was posted on an anonymous forum as well. It's by Crypt of Lovecraft or whatever. Crypto Fluff. Maybe there's a word, I'm just not seeing it. But it said Hudson was Ethan's male murder victim friend. He was found dead in May of 2022 near a creek in Moscow, Idaho. Cause of death was determined an accidental drowning. He was in a frat that allegedly waterboarded its pledges. Any mention of this boy's death only 6 months before the massacre at King Road is left out of the official narrative. His death has allegedly caused friction between Ethan and the other frat boys. Now, this is crazy in general. I don't think it's related to this. However, if this screenshot was sent to me today, it says this case was refreshed a month ago from October 16th of 2015. You have Chrissy, you have for domestic violence, meaning a family case in the jurisdiction of.
So Cheryl is the mother.
Yep.
Steve is the son versus his other son, Nathan. His other brother, sorry. Cheryl's the mom.
And so it is interesting. There was a protection order hearing, but there is a confidential information form, 2 confidential information forms.
Correct.
By the sheriff's office, which I don't know if it's always through the sheriff.
It depends on where he got picked up, right? So if the sheriffs arrested him, they have the lead. If the PD arrests him, they have the lead. But here's the deal with the sheriffs. The sheriffs report to the FBI. They have that. And do you know that most sheriffs go through FBI training?
Wouldn't surprise me, Phoenix, with how much power the sheriff have.
Oh, absolutely. So then obviously the FBI reports to the Attorney General. So when you look at this case, and have you dug down and to find out what this case was about?
No, I have not.
There's another case that goes consecutively after this. So Steve's brother, Nathan, allegedly is a long-time rug user, has a rap sheet, so could potentially be an informant. Allegedly.
Yeah. I think this we should table this, Phoenix, so we could dive into it more. Like I was saying, I want to just do the Q&A, and I'm not trying to cut that off. I know us, next thing you know, we'll be at 3.5 hours. So I
know.
I'm going to be on my normal weeknight schedule, 7 p.m. Central. And I hope everybody enjoyed Allie. Allie, if you're still watching or if you see this replay, thank you again for your time. And thank you to Devil's Advocates. Mondays are always fun. Phoenix and I will be on our normal schedule, 7 p.m. Central. This Thursday, I will have Sammy T. Mafia back. Last Thursday, I was out of town. She had a friend in town. And please, 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 if anybody has a contact in some profession that would be interesting to talk to about the quote unquote true crime or contrarian thought process of crimes, please do not hesitate to share this email with them so that we can get them on as a guest, because I think that is always extremely interesting and fun. Plus, as a reminder, if you want to be a part of the first Hive Mind Roundtable on June 22nd, as a reminder, please email me I've seen 8 or 9 come in. So there's some people that are interested, definitely enough to fill the table. But if anybody
Nice.
still wants to, I'll probably close that at the end of this week so that we can sift through it and I can get it organized with everybody on an email chain as far as getting you the link for StreamYard to join. So I'll try to organize it so that it's easy and simple for you all, so that all you have to do is click the link, pop up, and share your thoughts. So Phoenix, thanks for popping up. I look forward to tomorrow night. And with that being said, everybody, thank you for a great chat as always. Thank you. I don't have mods on YouTube. I need to get some, but
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you to everybody who's made this such an awesome night. And I will see you all tomorrow. And I hope everybody sleeps amazing and has a great Tuesday. Cheers.
Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life.